Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council adjourned meeting of Thursday, September 7th, 2017. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Albertson. Bueller, absent. Danforth.
Here.
Lallam.
Here.
Manti, absent. Roby, absent. Solom.
Here.
Thorson.
Here.
Vilhauer.
Here.
Y.
Present.
Thank you.
The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Moved by Vilhauer, second by Y. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 2, presentation, review, and public input on the 2018 proposed budget for the Urban Renewal Loan Fund. Shelley?
Thank you. This is a discussion item that came up from the Tuesday council meeting. And so the first reading of the ordinance incorporated the urban renewal assessment and the expenditures in that fund. And since there isn't a revenue source, we needed to make those changes. So this sheet that you have here is the changes. And let the record show that Roby is in attendance. Okay. I went through, and there was a couple personnel issues that we found in the general fund that we were actually doing something totally different, and realized that there was some staff turnover and just an error that was made in the IT department, and we wanted to get those corrected so that we had the best numbers possible for the general fund. As you can see, for the urban renewal, we took all the expenditures out, and then we also removed the urban renewal assessment revenue as well as the volunteer center rental. We moved the volunteer center rental to the general fund because the costs associated with operating that volunteer center were also moved to the general fund under City Hall. So if we continue down this path, in looking at the general fund, there was really no other good place to put the expenditures from the urban renewal fund other than underneath the City Hall budget. So whether we want to in the future call it City Hall / government buildings, I guess you guys can make that determination. But you can see the expenditures that were moved to the O&M budget to City Hall. And then on the revenue portion, I always make an estimation of the property taxes, and we get final numbers kind of late in the game from the county. I did get those numbers yesterday and went back through, and it's actually $6,150 in our favor. So I went ahead and made those changes as well. So basically, you say, what's the impact? Well, that is this sheet. Okay, when you're looking at it, if anybody would ever look, when I come in and I say that we have a balanced budget, if you would ever look at the general fund and you would look at the expenditures and then you'd look at the revenues, they do not equal. Okay. The way that we do our budgeting and the conservative way that we budget, we usually always, and you can kind of see that, we always underestimate our revenues and we budget for the expenditures we think we're going to need, but we are really good at spending only what we need. So we routinely do not spend our entire budget. And so we factor in a 5-year percentage, and we put those to the requests. So we say on an average year, we're going to spend this much of the requests, and we're going to take in about this much of the revenues that we're anticipating. And then we put in that formula. So at the end, our projected surplus deficit should be 0 or positive. Okay, so I am always charged with, and I've never gotten anything different from the council, that I must present a balanced budget to you. If you guys want to spend fund balance, that is up to you, because that's what you do. You appropriate money and you make policy. So just in full disclosure, I just want to let you know that the changes that were made based on this sheet that we just went over, we do have a small deficit of 1,680 that, if everything goes like is anticipated, we'll use about $2,000 of fund balance. So I know it's pretty minor, but I don't want to tell you that the budget is balanced, because we do have a little bit of a deficit going into this. But you know, like I said, in looking, there really wasn't any place else that didn't already either have a deficit. The Park and Rec, we are already using available fund balance. In the BBB tax, we're using available fund balance. So there really wasn't any other good place to put it, and it's not appropriate to put it into the second penny sales tax. So this was the recommendation that I made. The one thing that I didn't do anything with is the flowers. There is no place to support it at the level it's being supported now. We do budget $5,000 in the third penny sales tax, and that pays for the Highway 81 flowers. Historically, we've never gone above $3,000. We've sat in that $2,100 to $2,600 range. So I think that would be adequate, and they get a lot of flats of flowers for that. So I can't imagine that we can't get enough to fill the planters. If the Urban Renewal Board wishes to continue that, then they can just order at the same time that the Park and Rec orders their flowers for 81, and they can plant them at the same time. So that one, I felt that there was enough of a budget already to fund it at the same level that we do the Highway 81 flowers. So, and again, that one, you know, we were already spending some anticipated fund balance to cover all of the expenditures. So I wasn't going to raise that amount. But if that's where you guys want to appropriate more, that's completely up to you. But that is not reflected. There is no change to add any additional money to that in the proposal that you have in front of you. So then the last one is the new ordinance that incorporates all of these changes. And you'll, so this is the ordinance. Unless you make changes to it, this is what the ordinance will look like come second reading for you to adopt. So I will open it up if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, I can hopefully answer them.
So Shelley, we're covered on the cost for operating the restroom. The flowers, we haven't specifically put anything in, but we're using little less than half. So it would require a donation of labor per se, an effort for the labor to get them in place. So
right, and the Park and Rec usually uses their full-time staff, and then they set up volunteers.
Right.
And so I would assume that the Urban Renewal Board would want to make that effort along with the and kind of go on that same and order the flowers, because I think they can get a little bit of a discount just based on the sheer volume of how many they buy. So
Who has taken care of ordering the flower pots for the downtown in the past? Has that been?
I think that I know last year Beth and Randy just worked with, I think it's the Tree Farm is who they contracted with, and they basically took all of the baskets, planted them all, kept them for a couple months, and then went and helped hang them and get the watering started and that type of thing.
On behalf of the Urban Renewal Board, is that?
Right.
They were acting as the Urban Renewal Board, so that would be
Right.
something the Urban Renewal Board should figure out how they want to deal with that. Get some volunteers or
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
be.
Yep. Because
Urban
basically,
Renewal
it'll that $5,000 that's in the third penny sales tax will
Right.
cover all of the flower needs for 81 in downtown. The way that it sits in this ordinance, that's the way that it is.
So as we sit, we're 2,000 short of being balanced today, right now, right? Assuming nothing gets added or deleted. So what would normal practice be for us to do at this point? Identify where that's going to come from?
Well, it'll just come from unallocated fund balance at this point, and that's and like I said, it's based on the analytics that we do. That if it runs true, that's where you're going to be.
So are you saying, in the past, we've, 5-year average, 95.42% of what we budgeted is what we spent. So, if that happens again, that would be more than $1,600, then we'd be fine. We wouldn't actually, it
Right,
would come
right.
out in the wash with that.
Right. Yeah, and that's just and when we do this balancing, I always try to be a little bit more on the positive side, just because it's all a 5-year rolling average. So you always hope you do a little better, but if you don't, you at least have a little bit of a cushion. But this is just right now. If the numbers came in exactly like this sheet, I can't sit here and tell you that I believe this is a balanced budget. But it's within a couple $1,000s. I don't think that's a great amount of risk. But like I said, I'm charged with bringing you with a balanced budget. So I just wanted to be completely honest that it's not quite there. I just thought I'd leave it up to you to take that risk or to do something different.
So when the Urban Renewal Board has something that they would like, they're just going to bring it to the city council and then contingency fund or something, if we approve it, which is what they haven't done at this point. The only two things were the flowers and at this point, that's the only two things. So if they had something else that was for the good of the downtown area, and if they came to the board, the council, then we would just take it out of a contingency fund or something. They'd either do it during the budget process itself, or if there's things that came up throughout the year, they'd have to come and approach it, and it'd be up to you guys as a governing body to decide whether it was something you wanted to do now, something you wanted to budget for later. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Shelley, is it fair to say that the Urban Renewal Board essentially looks like another external organization? Is that how they're going to be treated?
I don't believe so, because they will still, to some extent, work with the loan program. And then, I guess my hope is that they take the comments that they heard. There were board members here, that they take those comments seriously and as a board meet and determine, do we have a plan? What do we want to see? What do we, and come up with some of that and start doing some of that legwork and getting some consensus of what people want to see and what they don't, and if money is raised, where does it go? And up until the point where they have no real reason to meet, and then I guess it's up to you guys whether you would want to dissolve that board and not have it there, or dissolve the Urban Renewal District boundaries itself. I mean, that's up to you guys whether you feel that it has value or not. But right now there's community members that are questioning the value, and so I think they as a board need to address those and try to figure out where they go from there, and I would really encourage them to do that.
Shelley, just a few things. First of all, I'm fine with what you've done. A very small deficit with unallocated reserves that we've got the benefit of having. I'm fine with this. One thing that does concern me as I look at your 5-year history, though, your expenditures, yeah, that 95% or 95.42% looks reasonable. But as I look at the revenues, that percentage for 2017 has actually been a declining percentage from compared to recent years. So that could leave us somewhat short on the revenue side from versus using your percentage average. But overall, I'm fine with this. I'd like to circle back on the flowers for just 1 minute, though. So what we're saying as potential, we're looking at procedurally those flowers being maintained differently this year. Correct?
Not maintained. They've been maintained by the Park and Rec department as far as watering them. What will be different is the planting of them. Part of the cost of the urban renewal flowers was having somebody else plant them, keep them for, 6-8 weeks to get them to bloom to where they were, and then help hang them. They would go through and do the watering system and make sure that was all up and running. And so, those are the things that aren't funded at this point.
Okay, so throughout the course of summer, those flowers will be taken care of as they have been
Yes.
in the past?
Yep. It's just getting them
I
up there is
raising the point, I remember when I was involved in the chamber board, the chamber personnel were actually for a time taking care of those flowers downtown, and that did not work. That there was a change in the way those flowers were maintained, and it was definitely an improvement. So I didn't want to see us going backwards compared to what we're used to the last couple of years now. So okay, you've answered my question. Thanks.
Shelley, will we essentially clean out the urban renewal board fund then? Is that factored in? Other than the loan program?
Right. Yep. So any money that's there, there's about $10,000 that will stay as a cash balance and not be used because there isn't any expenditures for 2018. And then the rest of that is all for the loan program.
Okay, so are we taking that $10,000 or leaving that there?
Right now, it's there. I did not do anything with that. So that can be something that you can look at. I think it's good to just do this for 18 and monitor it and see what happens. And then as long as the urban renewal district is there and we have an urban renewal board, I don't think that there's any harm with just keeping that money there.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a motion to accept the changes to the urban renewal loan fund.
So moved.
Moved by Lallam, second by Albertson. Any further discussion?
Wait a minute, it's more than just a change to the urban renewal fund, though. I mean, we're looking at changes to our general fund as well because of this.
Yeah. I mean, you can either just accept all of these changes, but at least let me know that everything done with the urban renewal fund and where they're being allocated and where the money is there is at least acceptable. But either way,
the other ones we already
right. The other ones I incorporated them for them to be correct. It wasn't by anybody's, I mean, it was just to make it as accurate as possible, and
But
just to
you're
give
right,
you
it is
notification that these were additional changes that were made. But either way you want to do your motion is fine.
motion okay? All right. We already have a motion and second, so I'll ask for action. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item 3, presentation, review, and public input on the proposed capital improvement plan. The proposed capital improvement plan book can be found on the city's website under Governments Department Finance. A hard copy is available for viewing in the finance office. All right. Shelley, do you want to give an introduction?
I sure can. This process is just a little bit less formal than our 2018 budget process. This is something that the city has done for a long time for a couple of reasons. One is to anticipate any large construction projects that are coming up, to understand their impact both as a capital excuse me, purchase and the ongoing operating costs of it. It allows some analytics. Like our bigger projects, we determined whether we could bond for them, what we wanted to bond, whether we want to pay, if we want to save up capital funds for it, etc. The other thing that is important is, and we kind of break this up, if anybody reads the narrative, it kind of goes and explains what this capital plan is. It's basically not really a budget. It's not set in stone. It's something that's reviewed every year by the departments. And like next year when they go through the 2019 budget, they will look at everything that's in 2019. They'll determine whether it can be pushed back or not. If something else comes up that breaks, they'll swap things around. They'll review it, and then they'll stick it in, and then they'll go back through and they'll redo their long-term capital. And so things will move in and out. They shouldn't throw the whole thing out and put a whole new one together. I mean, you shouldn't every year look at something completely different, because that's not really a plan. It's hard to plan for that. But basically, the equipment is just a placeholder. So every department is asked to look at their equipment and come up with a useful life. If it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And then to plan replacements based on that. Then every year they need to plan for the current year based on maintenance costs, necessity, need, and then go back through their long term. So you'll see equipment on here, and they may not replace it in 2019, 2020. It's just, they say its useful life is 10 years, and the 10-year replacement is 2019, so that's where it's going to go. And we also started using it also for the mayor and departments in sharing equipment. We used to trade everything. Everything got traded. We bid, traded, got rid of it. And we found that the trades were not very good. And so we've really started either keeping them or giving them to other departments. And that just saves another department from buying another expensive piece of equipment. So knowing what equipment is going to get replaced when really helps other departments know, okay, I need to pick up who's getting rid of one, who's trading one off, the police cars, the dump trucks, it offers just a little bit, mowers, trailers, tractors. I mean, they've transferred a lot of things in between departments that other people aren't using. So that's another reason to have an equipment replacement plan. The other part of that, and that's why when you'll see by department, it's the equipment replacement schedule first, and then you have a long-term capital improvement plan. And if a department doesn't have one, it'll say there is none. Otherwise, they'll have their larger capital projects. And those are the ones that, as a council, I encourage you to spend a little more time on, because when we say in here that it's not a budget, but it reflects the city's firm intention, that's those capital projects. It doesn't mean that we're going to get this building in this year. But to the department head and to the public, it does reflect that you support it at some point when the revenue sources are available, when the need is there, and when the ongoing operating costs can be sustained. So, when you're talking about these things, if you have no support for the projects that are going on, I would encourage you to state that so that the department knows, the public knows. Don't keep something in there and let it keep going, and then you get to that point and you say, I don't like it. And they've been planning for this for the last 5 years, and then you wait till the current year and you don't like the project. So it's one of those things where that's something that I don't know that we've done in the past, that we probably just need to get better at, is identifying things that either you just don't support, and then we probably shouldn't keep them in, and at some point, if the support comes or the need comes, you can always put them back in. The direction to the department heads is any capital project that is new should go as far to the back as possible. For one, it allows you to see it for the first time, have discussion, determine whether you have support for that. It gives a little public input on whether the public supports that. It also gives time to start saving some funds if the intention is to take that out of cash reserves. Some of these projects that are $4 or $5 million, we don't have current resources that can cover all of those needs. So we do need to use some of that capital reserve, and we need to have time to accumulate that. So they're always asked, don't stick a $3, $4, $5 million project 2 years out, because we're never going to be able to collect the funds to have that available. Plus, it doesn't give you enough time to really look at that, research it, and determine whether that's something that you want to keep moving forward or that you want to support. Go
I
ahead.
have a question. I agree with and track what you're saying. On that point of putting a building, for example, on the budget 2 or 3 years out, we currently aren't putting anything away for any of those, are we?
We are.
Which one?
Well, potentially all of them. Anything that is over $500,000 in the second penny, there's a whole spreadsheet that I use, and I split it out, and I take a portion of those costs and I put them away under a restricted cash account for future capital. And so that's available when these big projects come up that you're not using existing fund balance. We just do a journal entry and we decrease that restricted cash and we use those. Most of the years we don't need them, but on the years that we do have these large projects, we kind of like the $2 million for the ice.
Well, that's
That
my
would
point.
that would come out of that restricted cash account.
Let me rephrase my question. We've done
Mhm.
that, but haven't we depleted that? That's
No.
really the question.
No.
I thought between the wellness facility and the ice, I thought we pulled some of that down.
No. Nope. We've transferred $750,000 to cover some of the costs at the I always think multi-purpose, the wellness center. Never get used to that. And then this $2 million is the first that we'll use for the ice that will come out of restricted.
Shelley, I'm probably jumping ahead to what you were going to go through, but I'd like to dovetail off Don's question, though. I'd like to turn to page 5 for just a minute, where we look at how we're funding the total amount that we get from page 4, the $60 million over the course of the next 5 years, and moving up the capital improvement sales tax revenues. We're looking at 7.7, 8.8, 10.3. I mean, obviously, we're not generating that kind of sales tax revenue right now. What do we get? 7.1, 7.2, something like that million. So obviously, either some of these things are need to be pushed back, or depleting some reserves, or even arrange for some debt financing. So just to point out that based upon current tax revenues, we don't have the current funding to pay for what we're budgeting in here.
Exactly. Yep. In the years that they're listed, and there's about, with interest, and if we keep getting the STIP fund, those STP, whatever those STIP funds are from the state, if you add all of those, it's anywhere in between $8.5 and $9 million total. And then you have to take the debt and the transfers away from there, and then you have really what you're working with, which is about $5.5 million. So if you look at that, it's unrealistic for 3 out of those 5 years unless you're going to use those reserves. Yep, which we have, between $5 and $6 million sitting in that restricted cash account for capital projects.
And again, I think you just said it, but I want to make sure I understand it too. What's listed on page 5 for current year expenditures out of that second penny, that does not include current debt obligations that have to come out of that as well.
Nope, and that is stated here that debt is not included in our long-term capital plan, because that's basically something that you can't say, you know, let's just not pay that bond payment this year. It's going to get paid regardless of whether you want it to or not. So, but it's always there. And the conservative way that we have always budgeted is whatever revenue number I come up with, I take the bond payments off the top and then say, okay, this is what we have to work with. Where's the requests and where are the needs? And that kind of says what do we have and what do we need to cut. So you always make sure you can pay your bills and then you pay for the rest. Yep. And so that's where part of what this narrative is. It just, because there's no totals on any of these departments, it lets you know that there are some cities, if you look, their long-term plan only includes things that they're actually going to put as a fixed asset and depreciate. We use that a little bit differently, and you'll see where we will budget computers and, you know, we will put that as capital. The reason that we do that is because it fluctuates. And so when you're trying to do an O&M budget and you're looking at a line item and it just keeps yo-yoing up and down, sometimes the instinct is to just keep that up whether you need it or not, and then maybe even put a little inflationary thing onto that. And it's just better to pull some of those things out and put them as capital, whether we record them as a capital asset or not. So that's why you'll see smaller items that we don't do every single year listed as a capital expenditure. It's easier budgeting. It's easier for you guys to see trends. It's easier for department heads to see trends, and just easier to keep track of budgets based on need, not just based on a number, and not having some of that detail, or remembering that you had a larger purchase this year, but you're not going to have that this year. So that just kind of tells you, and then it'll tell you from the requests that were made, the mayor sits and meets with all of the departments, goes through all of their requests. And so through that process, there are some changes that the mayor recommends, some changes that the departments incorporated because of the 2018 budget cuts that were made, and then some that they just looked and they said, that's going to be replaced this year, or oops, I have too many computers on here, we can take this one off, and just cleaning up the long-term CIP to reflect what they really were requesting. So you see all of those by department and where it was moved, how it was moved, the amount. I tried to put why. And then you can kind of see on the 5 years where the requests on the mayor's proposed long-term CIP is $60,566,795. And then you can just kind of read about where some of those larger projects that we talked about are, and then how they're going to be funded. Here's the revenue sources that are going to fund. And then it kind of, again, goes through what we use the equipment replacement plan for. And it's not, you know, it's something that you should be aware of. And some of the changes that were made last year, if you look, on each department, I copied the mission statement that they have from the budget book, because I think that's important. You need, you know, that the capital should also reflect what is the overall mission of this department and what's the description of the department. So that comes from the budget book. And then I asked all of the departments to give me their replacement, equipment replacement schedule, because I think that's important for you guys too. And that's because that's really what we ask the departments to do. Put down based on what you think you're going to replace in what year, so that we know what equipment is coming up, what the cost is, And so you kind of see how they're replacing stuff based on their replacement plan. And again, it's something that if you question why they have, how many do you have? Why do you have so many? Why do you replace them every 10 years, not 12, 15? I mean, if you want to, I would focus on those type of things. Or I know one year we talked about servers when we had so many of them in the long term. And that's kind of when we started talking, well, maybe we should get to a central server type thing. Maybe we should become one big network. Maybe we, and that was kind of a direction to IT to start moving in that direction, which is what Spencer has been doing with phones, with servers, with fiber, trying to get us more connected and to take some of that out. And that does take time to get to that point. So some of those will still remain in the long-term CIP till they're absolutely not needed any longer. But, if you have some comments or questions on the equipment schedule, that to me, that's kind of more what you should be looking for, not specifically looking at what year or, it's a tool that you can use. The long-term capital plan is really, I think, kind of the meat and potatoes of this because, for one, they're big dollars, and they always have an operating impact. Even when a developer builds a road and gives it to the city, it's going to cost the city more money to chip seal, to crack seal, to mill and overlay because you're adding more blocks. So everything that happens at some point in time is going to add something to the cost of the city providing services and operating. So again, we state that this is the city's firm intention to complete these projects in future years. So if it is something that you just absolutely cannot get behind, cannot support, do not want to support, have that conversation so the department heads don't think that you're all on board and then we get to them trying to put it into the current year budget and we have issues. Or the public says, oh, you're on board with this and eventually we're going to get this when there's really no intention of ever completing that. To me, it just gives everybody a clear picture of where your goals and mission is citywide and how you're asking the different departments to support those overall goals and objectives. So does anybody have any questions?
I got a couple quick ones here. As we look to either support or not support this, especially what we're talking about is the bigger projects, we're looking at a 5-year window, basically, but then we have the beyond 5-year category, right? So if we have a project that, okay, I'm okay with the project, but I just don't see it fitting in the 5-year plan, then what happens? How does it get into the beyond?
Yeah, I have a tab for the beyond. We used to keep a closer track on that, but it was kind of something that got forgotten, and so I guess if you don't want to support it in the 5-year, because of the fact that we put funds aside, I would remove it and say it belongs somewhere in the future, and then hopefully the department head is here. If they are not, I will make sure that I let them know that they need to put it sometime in a future CIP. It just doesn't belong in this 5-year span.
Right, and because that's a very important point, is we used to have that one where we'd say, okay, we don't think it's really going to fit in here. I like the project, let's keep it on the radar, and we'd put it in that beyond the 5-year thing so it was on the radar. From our standpoint today, not that we don't like the project per se,
Right.
but is it the right project in the 5-year span?
Right.
That's what's critical.
Yep.
Okay.
And like I said, we used to have that, but it almost like it got forgotten. So there were some things that were on the 5-year and beyond that never got off of it, that just stayed there forever and never got addressed. And so I last year and this year, I have not put that in there. If it's something that you want, that's fine. But, we're just going to need to be more diligent about looking at those projects and having departments look at those and determine where they want them to be.
I remember sitting here 2 years ago for my first go-around on this, and you said almost those exact same words, and that's why, I mean, I assume that we haven't seen it the last couple of years, so I felt too that going beyond that 5 years, we can't ignore it, but it was almost meaningless, and to the point that it stayed out there forever in that beyond 5-year part. I would just like to say, either I'm getting smarter at this, but I really like the way this book was laid out this year. It was very user-friendly, at least for me, to go through this compared to the last couple of years. So I commend the way this was put together this year, Shelley.
Well, you know, I always make an attempt to get a little bit better than I was before. And from listening to some of the comments, and even just from me trying to put these together, I thought maybe it would be easier to look at this kind of like we look at the budget book. So I tried to make it a little more similar looking and have a little less clutter. And then I thought it was important to have that equipment replacement schedule. If you're going to look at the equipment replacement schedule, you should probably have a little bit more information. And then also to just always keep in mind for not only the public but also for you, really what's this department here for? You can get so used to seeing a department, what's its mission? What is it trying to do as far as providing services to this community? And you always have to keep that in mind when you look at what the requests are, the money that's being appropriated to it, and do you feel that that is providing what we need to fill this overall mission? And what this department is here for, or are we getting a little bit off track? Because sometimes you can branch out to a point where, you know, the integrity of what this department was actually brought here to do is a little convoluted. So you always need to keep in mind that we're not branching out to a point where maybe we're compromising the integrity of the department itself. So with that being said, does anybody else have any questions about the format of the book?
No, but I do have one more question, and then I promise I'll be done. When we have the dollars that we are taking out and setting aside for capital, are they, when you said they're in a restricted cash account, are they per project or in one holding area? Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Yep. Okay, so we're basically just going to go in order, and the only time a department head will come up is if you have a specific question. This is something that really they brought, and along with the mayor, talked about it, determined that they were going to support this. So other than just kind of going through and talking about it, if you guys have any questions, yell them. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of keep moving on because there's some that don't have a whole lot. If you have any computer, IT, technology questions, if you could have those addressed to Spencer. He basically took an entire year, bless you, and got with all of the departments, and he has a database of all of their technology. And so he's keeping track of their replacements, their needs, and you saw that kind of in the 2018 budget where we started moving some of that stuff under the IT department for him because he does all the ordering and he sets them up and kind of goes through the needs. So he took care of most of that, and we went through that with him during this process. So if there are any specific questions about that, address those to Spencer. Otherwise, the departments are here if you have any questions. So the first one is the mayor and city council. And they're one that basically has just the technology. There's a few printers, computers, the council and mayor laptops. I know that's something that you guys are going to go through next year and kind of get a feel on what are your needs, what do you want to see, what's useful, what's not, and whether you want to continue with that program, whether you don't. I know when I first got here, councils didn't have computers, and then you got them, and then since then, almost all of you have changed, or probably all of you have changed. So it's something that probably should be reviewed. Technology is always changing. So I know Spencer has been charged with that to just kind of, what do you guys want? What do you guys need? Maybe something, maybe nothing. But until that decision is made, every 4 or 5 years, they're replaced, and so that will stay in that replacement schedule until something else is determined. And I know that they kind of upped the cost because based on what you guys want, even if you want one that's stationary that sits here, those aren't cheap. And so, you know, they're, or surface, whatever they're called, you know, they're not cheap if you want to put something with them. So everything always gets a little bit more expensive. And so I think we used to, I think there was 13,000 or something like that. And we did up that because we didn't feel that that was a realistic number to replace all of those. So does anybody have any questions? There is no long-term capital improvement for the mayor and city council.
When we start going out, are all these numbers based on what we estimate today's costs are, or are there inflation factors built in at all?
Most of the time, they're based on what today's dollars.
What we know today.
Yep. Because sometimes you can, if you put an inflationary, you can get pretty crazy when you get out. Because some things have an inflationary, and some things have less of an inflationary cost. Some things actually can go down. I mean, we've actually decreased the cost of our printers because you can get more for less. So no, most of them will not put an inflationary cost the farther out they go. Okay. Page 9 is government buildings. This is where the senior center is an older building. Every year we seem to have some costs associated with the maintenance of that building. So a few years ago, we just started putting in $5,000 for any of those. And it's really up to the people at the senior center to tell us if there's any issues. And then the administrative building, if you remember, last year we had $2.5 million in, and then $1.5 million. And because of I think where we're at with the ice and having that unknown, and then also with the county having a conversation with the mayor with what our interest is with having a joint facility. I approached the mayor and said, are you okay with bringing this back down to the 2.5 that it was originally budgeted at, with the anticipation that if an administrative building was constructed, it would be in conjunction with the county. And she thought that was okay, and so that's where it sits, and it's still sitting in that 2020. Now, whether that's something, and the reason it didn't get pushed back was I have had no meetings with the county, so I don't know how quickly they would want to move on a building, what their plans are, if they're still interested in that, or if they're kind of going back to the drawing board, or what their plans are, but didn't know if it was appropriate to move it too far back until their intentions are a little more clear, whether they're serious about that or they're really not. They were just looking at all their options, so to speak.
Okay, Shelley, on this one, then, we've talked about having some dollars available within our budget, wherever, for prospective land purchases at times. And one of them was, if the right opportunity came along for a location for a city hall or administrative building, that we would certainly want to be able to take advantage of that. Is that what this number could also represent, or is this actually the building? Is there something different for potential land acquisition and, let's say, costs to get that, if there's a building there today to get it raised and get the lot at a level?
Right.
Is that this number, or is there something different for that?
No, this number was more for the construction. At the time that the previous Mayor Thorson was looking at locations, we had put $200,000 in to the current year budget, and we had carried that forward, I think at least 1 year, maybe 2. So right now there is nothing, I don't believe, in the 18 budget for land. I don't believe that we have a line item. Without seeing it, I don't think so. So we don't have anything like that. The only thing that we have in our restricted cash was that land sale from GLE that we told Glacial Lakes that we would, or Glacier Lakes, that we told WDC that we would hold in a restricted cash account to go in with them on a land sale. But otherwise, right now, there's nothing in the 18 budget for land purchases.
But we did have in 16 and 17, so is it an account with 400,000 in it?
No, nope. It had 200,000 in it, and it was just carried over with the thought that the search was continuing and nothing had been determined, and it wasn't something that was put into the 2018 budget.
I remember 2 years ago, I think the figure was 3 million 2 years ago. I think we upped to 4 million then last year, but I think we all acknowledge that we're essentially pulling numbers out of the sky at that point. So I think there's no, I mean, a number in here is fine as far as what that number is going to be. But what I do like in the comments that I've heard is I think pursuing something with the county definitely has some merits. And so whatever that number is, I would like to see us have some thorough conversations with county personnel as well to see if we can save some dollars on both sides.
And actually with that 4 million, because it was 2.5 was what it came with, and the comment was made, I don't know that that's enough. So another 1.5 was put into the next year, because you usually don't do one of those buildings in 1 year. So it equaled 4. And Mayor Thorson did talk to an architect and say, if this is what you had, what could you do? And they did do a building mock-up of, I think it was 25,000 square feet, and put offices in it and what it would look like, all one floor, so you don't have the extra cost of elevator and that type of thing. So that's why that number, I mean, it is a realistic number. Now, if you would go in on a joint building, I don't know, because then you have two parties that have to agree on what the design, the layout, the construction material, all of that type of thing. But it was a realistic number. Now, would it have covered the architect and engineering costs? No. Or the land costs? Probably not. But you could at least construct a building. So the 2.5 didn't, all I did was just cut off the 1.5 and just left the 2.5, because really, until they give a firm intention, and I don't even know what they want to put in there, what the size would be, what the location would be. It's hard to even imagine what those costs would come out to being, what our square footage need would be based on their square footage, and I'm guessing the cost of the building would be appropriate, a portion based on our square footage. But that's why it's in 2020. So does anybody have any heartburn about that staying in at that level in that year? Okay.
I would that's just around the corner in building years.
It is. I figured within a year the county would have to determine, just based on their jail space and their needs, within a year they're going to have to come up with something. They're going to have to come up with a plan B, or go back with another bond issue. So I would think within the next 6-8 months you should hear something from them as to what their intentions are and whether they want the city to participate in that or not.
So the question is 2020 too far out, even if it's just around the corner? Is it too far out if you say 6 or 8 months are going to come to us next? I mean,
I don't know. I guess well, look at how long it's taken the ice. It could take a year to just come to a conclusion on how the city and county want to have this built, and the materials and the costs, and hard to say. But the mayor and I did not feel that it should be put back any farther, and it can always be moved up in next year's CIP if you feel that it needs to be, or a firmer number maybe you're going to have at that point. Okay. Next, page number 10 is the city attorney. Again, just computers, printers, laptop. Some of it was moved around a little bit just based on the fact that that position is vacant. and Spencer can maybe answer this better, but the computer was moved closer in because Justin had used a laptop and a docking station, and if the new city attorney coming in wasn't comfortable with that or wanted to use something different, there was funds available to make those adjustments and those changes at that time.
That's right.
So that's why it went from 2021 to 2019, just based on that. And then the laptop does not mirror the city council because his was replaced earlier than yours is going to. So his is on a little different 5-year rotation. Any questions? Moving on to finance office, we're a lot of the same. The one thing that I will point out is the accounting software. We have Encode software from Tyler Technology. We implemented that in May of 2004. We had a DOS-based version. If anybody old enough to remember DOS? Yeah. From Tyler Technology, and they got this new awesome thing called Windows-based accounting system, and we jumped right on board in 2004. And we still have that software. And in looking at, I kind of approached Spencer a year ago. For one, because they're getting too big to the point where they're really hard to answer questions. When you do ask them questions, they don't really know the answer. We're having issues integrating computers, printers, software, servers, and they aren't the most friendly to deal with. We're going to get to a point where they're going to want us to move to what they call version 10. Utilities has version 10 and they still hate it. And so that gives me a whole lot of pause to why I want to jump on that bandwagon when after 2 years they still don't like it because it still has bugs. It still isn't very user friendly. The other thing they haven't kept up with is dashboards, better reports that you can just dump into Excel. It's a very tedious system to do that. They don't have customized reports. Every report costs us anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000 if it's not a standard one that they put in there. Right now we're I think, are we on a server? We're on a server,
yeah.
Correct? So you have to do updates every week. It's not cloud-based where it automatically gives you some of those updates, fixes things. And so it's one of those things where both Spencer and I, because unfortunately Spencer has to deal with their programming people when he puts a new computer in the finance office and it won't print or prints ginormous, or we can't get the Laserfish to hook up, or they'll sit on the phone for hours, and it's just getting a little more difficult. And so there's other products out there, not many, that deal specifically with government fund accounting, but they are, and they're just a little bit better product. And I think it was last year that you went out for some quotes, and that's where the $60,000 number comes into. And it'll take probably 9 months to actually just go through and implement and get everything changed over, get all the training done. So 2019 is probably the most realistic time frame to, he's going to need a big chunk of 2018, because I think it was almost a 9-month project just to go, and we had the same Tyler Technology, just to go from one program to the other and implement a lot of information. So that's something that I think was farther back in last year's long-term CIP, and that's been moved up for the reasons that we kind of told you is I think it's going to be a point where they're either going to stop servicing our version to force us to upgrade to something that's going to be problematic.
We're getting close. Just to add to that, we're getting really close there. I have other concerns with we're going to be going Windows 10 in sometime. We'll have to make that jump. And I'm concerned about compatibility issues there, as well as we have to integrate two softwares together. So we have Encode and then we have Laserfish, and they've got to talk together. We're losing out on support with Laserfish because we have to have an older version that integrates with the old Encode. So we're losing out on support there. So there's several concerns with the software.
Just a comment, you heard my pitch a couple of weeks ago about the cloud-based system for the email service. I mean, depending on how that goes and how that works for us, I really think that's something that we want to give consideration to for other applications, including the accounting software.
This is.
Yeah, so before we make a decision, I'd definitely like to see us consider some kind of cloud-based options out there too.
Yep,
That was
and I
one
think
of the ones we were looking at was
Yep.
cloud-based.
So
Yep.
this is cloud-based, or
Yeah,
okay,
yep.
okay.
And-
the number we got was a cloud-based
Yep.
offering.
And most of them, when you look at it, one that they dump on a server or one that they service cloud-based, the upfront cost, there's not a lot of difference. There's a lot less difference than you think. It's just your ongoing maintenance costs are just a little bit different. But when you go from one to the other, whether it's cloud or not, they're going to do a lot of work building our system into theirs and then dumping all the information. And then usually they'll run them parallel for a month to make sure that it's working and get the bugs out and make sure that everything's talking appropriately. So regardless of what you do, you have a pretty sizable upfront cost. It's then the maintenance costs that will be, you'll see the difference in. But I think also the cloud-based allows I think greater accessibility. Right now, the finance office is the only one that has access to that accounting system.
That was something I was going to add also. The accessibility, multiple users, say the department heads, could maybe log in, see what the status is of their accounts, or asset management, possibly fleet management might be something that will tie into. This could be the backbone of the city.
Right.
I think
And
the software is
yeah.
not just a finance software, but
Right.
something
And we also,
moving forward.
when I went to GFOA, the conference in Denver this last year, the one question I asked everybody who has an accounting is, do you have like a building services module for permits, for keeping track of databases and that type of thing, for billing, for sending stuff out? And there's at least 3 of them that do. So that's something that we've never had access to, something that we could add onto this platform that could serve engineering and building services as well as finance, and another piece that could integrate so we do less journal entries, we become more efficient because we're all one platform, just have different modules that talk to each other. So there's a lot to gain from it, and it's time. It's time to look at options and I think to better serve what Watertown needs. So otherwise, everything else is just basic computers, printers, copiers.
Shelley, what's the chance of them telling us, say next year, we're not gonna facilitate any more repair items and things like that?
I would almost expect that.
They very well could.
I mean, it's
So there's a possibility that this could move from 2019 into 2018.
Well, and again, the hard thing is once you start that, it takes a long time for those programmers to build your city inside an
something
accounting
now.
software.
So they
we'll get it fixed.
so they pull all
Yeah.
our information and basically set it up for us. So it's like, here
Yes.
it is.
Yes.
Start working.
Yes. And then they'll
And
come.
training.
Yep, they'll come and they'll train you. And then, like I said, you'll do the old system and you'll do the new system in tandem for a month. And then when you do your month end, you do all of those reports together, and do you come up with the same number to make sure that the integrity of your beginning balances are there, as well as, is a system working? Is it talking to each other? Is it pulling from the right places? Do you have any bugs? Do you have anything that you need to work out? Anything that you need to change? Anything they didn't incorporate? So, yeah, it is just a lot of work. You feed them a tremendous amount of information, and then they build each individual thing, and then they come back to you and you look at it and you troubleshoot different things, and then, you know, I mean, so it takes a lot of time.
So that 60,000 includes them setting it all up and training.
As of
For-
last year.
Okay, so there might be an increase in there,
Who
but
knows?
they're at least doing the training, so it's not just here's your system, go.
Yep.
Okay.
I would just add, if they're gonna dump that version, they'll give you usually a sunset period in there, a year or something like
I
that.
think we're in the sunset period.
Oh, you've been notified already? Okay, all right.
We-
Well,
we-
that-
and
They,
see,
they want us to go 10 ever since I've been here. So,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they've been pushing it heavily.
The other question I have is, I mean, you're separate from the utilities, but they're using the new version. Is there any, will you lose any synergies then with utilities going that way?
no, they run a completely separate set of books over there, and we basically, for our stuff, we have one revenue account, one expenditure account to keep our books balanced with the cash, and that will become even less of an issue if they split off their cash. But no, because they were on a different accounting system for years before they changed to Encode. So
Spencer, 60,000 for the software, but would we see issues with computers and printers not being compatible with new software? Is there?
It's cloud-based, so as long as I can get a web browser up, I think we're in good shape. Right
Okay.
now with Encode, if a printer breaks, it is 2-week process, and I might not have as beautiful hair if I keep working on that.
So you wouldn't see that as an added expense of computers and printers not compatible?
No, it should be much better.
And I did ask that question too when I approached the different vendors that were there. You know, what are their requirements? And they said either way, it's, you know, they would have some server requirements if we would actually go on a server and not cloud based. But they said with cloud based, the computer speed is pretty minimal of what their requirements are.
I'm very
Anything kind of
confident
goes.
in that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the biggest
Yeah.
thing would be, do we keep Laserfish as an integration, or can we get it merged into whatever system we go to? That'd be the bigger thing. And
Yeah.
I'm not worried either way.
Yeah. Any other questions on finance? Okay. We'll move to IT. And I will let Spencer talk just a little bit about the networking piece and the citywide licensing. That's something that we didn't have previously. So if you want to talk about those. And then if you will notice, in the past, we've had 5 years worth of fiber optic infrastructure, and we have only 1 year. And so, Spencer, if you want to just talk a little bit about what your plans are for there, and the 25,000
Yep.
only going through 2019.
So we'll start with the Microsoft licensing. So what we're doing this year in the 2018 budget is we're trying to get everyone on a certain version of Microsoft Office. So we've bought a lot in the last couple of years, getting everyone on the same version, and then in 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we make a big purchase. That 80,000, I believe, is what I have in here, right? We make an $80,000 purchase, and then everyone on the city is running the same version instead of doing this per computer, because it's unmanageable, and I'm worried about audits and making sure that everything's kosher. So we just buy all of our license so we know everyone's compatible and we're good for an audit for Microsoft, which they're doing a lot of nowadays. So that's the 80,000. Any questions on that? As far as the networking goes, through the fiber builds that we've been doing with these 25,000 that we'll talk about in a little bit, there's been some networking that needs to be done to connect all the buildings up. And the way that works is we use a piece of hardware that has a 5-year license associated with, so we have a management portal that we can work on them, and after 5 years they basically shut it off. So what we have to do is I have to put money in the budget to either renew the license or replace it, replace the equipment. So what I did is I put in an approximate number to replace the equipment 5 years out. As that approaches and gets closer, we'll make the decision on, do we want to buy a 3-year license for it? If we feel that the networking equipment is doing well, maybe buy 3 more years, and that's going to be a much lower cost, and then replace it in 3 years. But it really depends on how the networking equipment is how it's working. But just know that there's a cost coming to keep things moving in the city. Any questions on that?
If we were to look at a new building, let's say 3-4 years out, how does that impact what we're looking at here, Spencer?
If we were to look at a new building, from an IT standpoint, it would be very interesting to see how IT is handled, first off, because the wiring and joint building, and now do I gain county work? I mean, there'd be a lot of questions on how it'd be handled from an IT perspective, because you have a structure and all of those wires run a certain place. So do we have 2 separate networks in there, or does everyone run on our network? It's really hard for me to know that, but it would affect us in the fact that we would have to get fiber to that building. And right now, the good news is we did change I call it the fiber hub, over to the police department. So it would only really affect our redundancy and our connection here at City Hall, which is a big deal. But I think if we planned it properly and we're close to downtown where most of our fiber is, or if utilities can get to it, I feel pretty confident that we can make a transition that would work just fine. But I would have to be heavily involved in the design and setup of that building. And then we cut the fiber optic budget because we pretty much got our core buildings that I feel like we're pretty good. We're going to have them connected, and then we're working with VAST next year to get the MPLS lines. It might be something we'll want to explore in the future, say if we can easily get, line out to solid waste or wastewater. If we ever have the opportunity to add fiber, it might be something I come to you guys and say, hey, is this a project you want to do? But I didn't think that reoccurring $25,000 made sense. Let's really let's get the 90,000 up there and really figure out what it's going to take to maintain some of the equipment we got and discuss it from there. But I feel pretty confident, unless we add buildings, that this reoccurring fiber budget isn't needed.
Spencer, on that 2022 licensing thing, right? So in 2022 we spend how long does that last us? Is that something that we'd see every 4 or 5 years typically, or?
Yeah, so I mean, if you can think about it right now, it's 2017, so you could have been running 2007 Office, which it really depends on staff goes, oh my gosh, did you know the new version could do X, Y, Z, and ours is 10 years old, or perceived as 10 years old. It really depends on what Microsoft does to push out. I have to put it in the long-term budget somewhere, so I think I assumed kind of we'll be buying the 2016 version next year, the 2016 version. So that's kind of us making it, what did I put it at? 7 years. And then I think what we'll want to do is we'll want to make sure that it's always on, kind of when Microsoft rolls out a new product, we want to get in there. Another option we're going to have as we get closer to this is we're going to move our Exchange server up to the cloud. What we could look at is doing a full-fledged Office 365 where we basically add the Microsoft licensing to that. That's another option we'll have. And then we always have the latest apps. But I think for now, I'm pretty comfortable for 4 or 5 years. Because that's a big cost. It's
Yeah.
just kind of shifting things more so, you know. Instead of paying for it 300 times, we pay one big time. It's a scarier number, but we've been paying for it. It's just a better management of it.
Any other questions? Okay. Move on to the engineering department. Again, they basically just have kind of those IT needs. Shane didn't have anything additional, any other equipment in the budget. And then under the capital part is the pictometry updates, and I think that's, Mayor can probably say more on that, but I think it's like a 3-year cycle, and we do that with the county. And I've never heard anything, I guess, from you guys as a council stating that you don't want to continue to support that. So that stays in there as a continued support to our GIS system. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. How come that 2020 is 11,000 more than the other ones?
It's the way that it gets billed out with the aerial photography happens, and then that's a big chunk, and then we get 2 smaller payments.
That's
So one's like the annual fee and the other one's plus.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they do that every 3 years, right? So that's why every 3rd year it's a bigger chunk.
Okay.
Okay, page 14, police department. They have quite a bit of equipment, as you can see, and their replacement schedule is there. And this reflects that. If you have any of the technology issues, Spencer can answer to that. Otherwise, if you have any questions on their vehicles, their firearms, AED, I mean, it's pretty routine stuff. A lot of times, when the time comes, they've gotten grants for some of their radios, some of their equipment, but they never really know until that time is coming. So we always budget it like we're going to pay for it, and then if it comes through. Is there anybody who has any specific questions on anything for the PD?
I have a question. And maybe this is for the chief. Are we uploading like the video daily to servers and things like that in case we ever need to go back and get that? I know that might not be capital improvement stuff, but I was just
What video are you referring to?
like
Adam?
from in car, or if we
the
go to
officers have
the
the body camera, they're in
Yep.
the cloud. They're docked daily and they're downloaded to the cloud.
okay.
And ones in the cars are a server at the police department, and then if we need to save them, we put them in the cloud as well.
Okay, that was my only question.
Yeah.
The only item that I had a question mark on was the treadmill. Is there a reason why a good piece of rec center treadmill couldn't be moved over there versus buying a new one?
Generally, when they're done with it, they're kind of wore out, Mike. We did get some of their equipment when they moved to the other building, a couple items. One was a bicycle, and once we got it over there, it wasn't worth keeping. That's for 2, and we could definitely spread that out over a couple of years, too. They're better quality than the ones you put in your house because they get more use, so we budgeted about $6,000 per. So it doesn't say on there that that's 2, but that's what that is.
And I take it that 2020 jump for 4 vehicles just cost increase?
No, it's the 105 is for 3.
Okay.
We've always kind of had 4 out there as a placeholder, and this year we looked through it, and for next year we're only going to get 2. We look one more year ahead, and we only need 3.
Okay.
And then after that, we're
Back to
thinking
4.
4, and every year we kind of reevaluate that. So when we come back before you next year, that might be 3 again the following year.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions? Continuing with the PD, if you turn the page, you get their long-term capital projects. And some of it will use general fund revenues because it's not over 50,000, but it's still basically not a piece of equipment, so it goes under the capital improvement portion of it. Does anybody have any questions on that, or does anybody want Lee to explain what that is and why that is?
Lee, when was that building put in service?
2011. And with any new building, Glenn, when you bid it out, you don't always get the highest quality of stuff. We've already replaced one piece of carpet in our briefing room just because the daily use and the seams. And the carpet throughout the hallways is starting to show a little wear. We do clean it yearly and try to keep it as best we can. So we figure we best put something in there for the future years to take care of that. Same with linoleum.
For that 2020, that 68,000, is that replacing most of it then, Lee?
That's for a great majority of the carpet because it's down the hallways and into the offices and it's all the same. So that's why it's a bigger chunk.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions on the police department? Okay, thank you, Lee.
Thanks.
We'll move on to the fire department. And for them, they're kind of in the same, you know, they have a certain piece of equipment that they routinely replace, couple larger pieces that that's one of the things that the Second Penny can fund is fire trucks and ambulances. So on their larger pieces of equipment on their fire trucks and ambulances, those will come from the Second Penny. Does anybody have any questions on any of their vehicle or equipment replacements?
What is a tender truck versus a rescue truck?
So a tender truck is a tanker truck with a pump. It's used for the county where hydrants aren't available. So it's actually a tanker truck modified into carrying its own pump. So it's a fire truck with a big tank. So, and the rescue truck actually, which is scheduled for 2022, is our smaller little Rescue 51, which is a lighter extrication, smaller pump. It's almost like on an ambulance chassis, so it can move at a quicker response, and we use that out in the county and when we get out on the interstate and stuff like that. So
Some of these items on here, do you sometimes get grants for?
yes, that is correct. Quite a few items we do get some grants for. A lot of our SCBA equipment, our radios, that's some of the stuff we've been taking advantage of in the past. We believe some of those pieces of equipment will still have that available in the future, and we just don't know that for sure.
Hey, Chief, those command vehicles, you got a 93 on there. Are those trucks or those Suburbans or?
Yeah, so actually, we were looking at that, and the 1993, I believe, is a Suburban. It's a service vehicle right now. What we have in 2019 is actually it's a 2004, and that's basically my vehicle. And we have some money in there. It's starting to get up there. It's 125,000 miles on it. What we're hoping for is to replace that with possibly one of these four-wheel drive squad vehicles or something in the future. It's kind of a placeholder in case that doesn't happen. And obviously 20,000 is just for a quality used one in case we don't find another source. The one in it's for 30,000 in 2021. That would be for another command vehicle. That would not be for the Suburban, and that's also a placeholder. So that's actually a 2005, and we'd like to use a squad car or something possibly in the future for that as well. The 2010, that's 45,000 in 2023. That's actually our command vehicle for the battalion chiefs. It's the BC rig, and that would be an emergency vehicle that would be replaced in 2023. Then that one would probably be utilized as more of a service rig, possibly over to another station or something. So I think that eventually would replace that 1993. If the 1993 would make it into 2023, that I don't know, but
we try and utilize some of our emergency rigs, whether it's a brush truck or a service vehicle, emergency vehicle. We'll kick them down into the service levels and stuff to get another 10 years out of them.
I think if you got 30 years on that, you'd be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Is the tender truck and the rescue truck typically used outside the state limits?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Typically. Yep. The tender truck, we have looked at a lot of options. Obviously, a brand new tender truck is higher than 200,000, but we're looking at different ways because it is used outside in the county for the townships and stuff to try and reduce that price by looking at possibly a refurbished truck or something like that would be rebuilt and would serve us adequately. So.
Any other questions on the equipment? Otherwise, we'll.
I just have one question. On the sprinkler system, is that lawn or indoors, or what type of sprinkler system is that?
That's actually inside of one of our older buildings, our older truck room and stuff. We found some areas where we'd like to do some modifications to get some additional sprinklers inside the existing truck room. And with the high dollars of equipment in that building and stuff, we'd like to put some protection in there and in case there's a lot of chargers, a lot of vehicles plugged in all the time and stuff, and it would just make sense for that amount of money to make those modifications.
Yeah, I would think your response time would be very good if you had a fire in your fire hall.
I'd agree.
Okay, and then do you want to just, as long as we're down on the capital part, do you want to just talk about the East Fire Station?
Yes, I'd be glad to. So what I'd like to do is just we've talked about this over the last 7-8 years, the possibility of an East Fire Station, and what I'd really like to do, we brought it down onto the 5-year plan to just review it and look at it, and what I'd really like to do with the East Fire Station over the next couple years is just start gathering data. What I'd really like to do is find some possible locations for an East Fire Station and find some land that would fit the criteria for an East Fire Station and actually look at that part first. Once we've identified the site, we would, we'd track the numbers and stuff, and once we have a good site in place, I'd like to put a stake in the ground that says future home of East Fire Station, Station 3. And that's really what I'd like to do before, just to plan out into the future. I'm not so concerned whether once we present all the data, the numbers, and set up jurisdictions as we talked about a little bit, what year that would actually be built. I think we have a lot of work to do, and obviously, can we afford to build it in 2023? What I'd really like to do is just identify the land and look at it over the next couple of years and try and find that spot, and then if the numbers don't support it, what we collect, then that can be moved to wherever it seems to need to be fit. So that's my recommendation, just looking ahead in the future.
Okay, Shelley, I got a question in regards to, it's the second time we've talked about the possibility of needing capital for land purchase. We talked about potentially administrative building, and now we've talked about this, and I think both of those are extremely important. So if we were to take something, let's say some portion of this $2.5 million and move it up a couple years, let's just say, does that mean that something in that year we move it into has got to move out? I mean, dollars wise, availability, is this, or are we not worried about it this time? We're just saying that's about where we'd want to do that.
Right. With the long-term portion of it, you always want to be cognizant of what you're putting in and is it realistic. And we kind of talked about that there are certain years where it's just not. We're not going to be able to support everything that's going to be done. But if you want to move things around, that's not only when you move stuff into 2018 do you
So
have
we're
to
not
come
worried
up with
so
a
much
current revenue
about
source.
some balancing act here dollars wise at this point and how we're going to do it. It's just because if that's the case, I think we need to make some adjustment for an administrative building prior to, what were we in, 2019 or 20?
2020.
I think we have opportunities. We've talked about some. I think we have to have some dollars in for a possible land acquisition for the administrative building, and I'm with Doug on, we know there's going to be a need out east somewhere for an east location of whatever it ends up being. And it is important that we identify that, and it doesn't have to be today, but it's important that we get identified and get a piece of land before everybody builds their houses around there, and then they don't want a fire department in their neighborhood. We need to say, here's our site, so people know it's coming, and then they can make decisions of what they're going to do in regards to how that's developed around it. So I know, Doug, that you've got the software, and I know we're looking at the data, and I think that's the right approach to take to see where our calls are and the times and all that type of thing. But I think if we wait administrative building-wise, and if we wait till 2020, where are we at, 3, to at least allocate some dollars planning-wise for either one of those sites, I think we're making a mistake. I think we need to have money available to us at any point in time when that opportunity comes along, and just carry over then. I really do. If we need to be able to react when an opportunity comes. Because more times than not, what we're seeing is an opportunity's coming to us more so than we're out searching. So just
and I
food
think,
for thought.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that isn't maybe a current budget issue. I know there's nothing in 2018, but I think maybe, if you're looking for something to be into a budget and carried forward, it's probably easier, like when we put that $200,000 in and just kept, you can do a capital carryover for 3 years or until the project is complete. So you can have that money and roll it over for those purposes. And I don't know that it needs to be specifically, say, for that or for the administrative building. It could be any land purchases that come up that the city feels is important. But, maybe that's something that needs to be kind of a recurring item in the second penny. If we're looking at, if you're going to support having an administrative building and an east fire station, and we're going to get to the street department, relocating the street department, there again, where do you put it? What do you do? It's going to come to some land acquisition if it's not in a place where we already own the land. But you can put money in here, but it's still going to need to end up at some point in time in a current year's budget in order to do it. So whether you do it here or whether you talk about it next year and throw it into the 2019 current year budget, I think it solves the same problem. That because this is going to only go into 19 is the soonest you can get any dollars allocated to land.
And I think the difference on the two items that we've talked about is it really is a matter of if. It is a matter of when. It's not and I'm gonna use this word nicety. It's not like a nicety of a softball facility or an ice facility that we can make decisions and there's we have obligations, we have needs. Both of those items, they are going to happen at some point. And I would hate for us to be in a situation where we can't respond or react to an opportunity, land acquisition wise, when it comes, because we know we're going to have the need. So I think we need to think about that, whether.
Yep.
Can I just add a couple thoughts to that? The idea has merit, and I think it's come up in our minds before. When you look at things like the Sun Chase, we had to act quickly. We took that out of reserves. Okay, we came fairly close to selling the land over here that the potential jail was going to go to. Well, that was always kind of semi-targeted for a city hall. Well, that would have been gone. And then we wouldn't have had a place or a potential placeholder. So I think the idea has merit.
How much factor of safety do you need? The 3 buildings I see coming, in the foreseeable future, City Hall, we have a piece of land that's ideally located that would be a top choice given any circumstances. We already own it. May not work out that we put it there for some reason, but right now we own it. So do we really need to be putting money aside for that in case we change our mind or whatever? Same goes for the fire station. We currently own land that, after analysis, we thought was an ideal location for an east fire station. We still own that land. And I still think, I mean, I would want to confer, obviously, with others, still appears ideal to me for an east fire station. So do we just want to put money aside in case we change our mind? Okay, street department. We currently own land in a really ideal location for a street department already. Should we put money aside in case we change our mind? I mean, what factor of safety do we need? There's 3 buildings, 3 pieces of land the city owns. There are 3 different pieces of land. Maybe we figure there's a chance one of those will change, so we put money aside for 1 out of the 3, and then it could be for any of them.
The question for you on that, Sarah, how did we fund all those purchases? We didn't put money in the budget for those. Did all those come out of the general fund or the reserves? They all came out of reserves, I'm sorry, is where they came from. So that strategy has worked thus far. Do we need to do the extra step like we're talking about here?
Doing
it's a factor of safety.
Right. Doing the extra step allocates current year resources versus saying your unallocated reserves are used for unanticipated things like land comes available for sale. That's the difference. Is it's 2 different pots of money that you're pledging for that just in case scenario. Maybe the county would rather look at the Midland building versus land we own. Maybe something would happen to the east station where it would become not so ideal anymore. Maybe something would happen to the ideal location for the street department, and maybe we'd have to buy some additional land or do some additional improvements to it over and above or whatever. You know, I mean, it's just, it's the different methodology of if you put it in the budget, whoever is sitting in this seat needs to find resources to pay for that. And usually we try to do that in current year resources. Whatever we're going to take in, we're going to spend on that budget. Or do you just use your reserves, and then you just have to be really choosy about what you use because you keep dipping into your savings account, and pretty soon you have no savings. So, you know, that's the danger you use about not budgeting for things and then always dipping into that reserve.
Just on that point, I'm comfortable kind of the way the strategies work this far because we dip into reserves, but that money is not gone. That's tied up in land, and that's not going to go to zero. We could run an up-down cycle, but the money's not all gone. So if we had to liquidate for whatever reason, we can recapture hopefully all of that. So again, the question is, the way we've been doing it is out of reserves. It seems to have worked thus far. We've got land for potential expansion. But again, I think the idea is merit. Do we need to take one more step?
I would have one of them. And all I'm suggesting here is we got monies, and this is out there. Good Lord only knows when, you know, if and when we'll spend those dollars. But I would take some segment of the dollars that we have in each one of these items, and I would move it forward just for that purpose of planning of potential land acquisition. You know, if we were to sell the land to the county like was projected for the new Justice Center, well, that land, that site was bought with the idea of new City Hall would go there. Then we shouldn't be going out and buying a new parking lot. We should be putting that money towards land on a new City Hall or administrative building. If we sell our land for where city streets is at, then that money should go back towards land or building for the city streets. And I don't know Sarah, where I've never heard of a potential site, to be honest, for the city streets to move. We just, yeah.
I'm thinking the area that we call the snow hole, where I mean, that area could be used for street department access and continue to be used as a snow hole. We wouldn't need the whole thing I wouldn't want to discontinue the use as a snow hole. And I do think that we should have a clear idea if these sites are adequate or not, because if they aren't, we're fooling ourselves hanging on to them for that purpose. If we need to do a little more investigation to see if these sites are going to be appropriate, let's do that, and then maybe we'll rule them out. Then we should more actively seek. I agree. We shouldn't just have this building fund with no idea of where we would put it.
Right, and because we've had, in the last year, we've probably had 3 or 4 different opportunities where people have come to us, say, you want to buy this. And we've had the discussion, and I believe most of those have centered around a new city hall or administrative building. Well, then I got to ask, why are we having those discussions at all?
That's a good question.
If we own the land
I don't
that
know
we
the
want,
answer to
then
that.
why are we even entertaining any option for that to come to us? So I just think that one way or the other, and I agree, Don, maybe what we need to do is for 2018 and such, we'll just go with the flow, and if something comes up. But I think over the course of now and into 2018, so before we sit down here next year, I think we need to have a darn good idea what our land availability is that we own, what our needs are going to be for what we know are going to be buildings coming, like these we've talked about,
Right.
and see if they work. If they don't work, then we got to go to Plan B.
Let's rule them out, and let's start actively finding and picking land for a purpose that's in the right location, not just has come up for sale, but let's actively seek a spot that we want instead of just buying something that someone wants to get rid of.
Just to interject a comment here, I'm not disagreeing with at all what you're saying, Mike, but to some extent, aren't we kind of chasing our tail? Because if we were to budget something for 2018 now, that would end up coming out of our unallocated reserves, which is exactly what we would end up doing if we didn't budget and something came along next year would come out of our unallocated reserve. So we end up the same place at the end of the day.
No, that's not what I suggested here. I suggested moving them up from 2023 some portion, if that's what we wanted to do.
I thought I heard a comment about let's move something into a
No.
budget item for 2018.
Shelley had mentioned something about if we want to. No, I'm saying break some small portion of that out of his $2.5 million or whatever that number was, move that forward 2-3 years. We're out into 2020, I think, for that $2.5 million, right? Maybe
Yes.
we move $200,000 into 2019 instead of 2020, just to be safe. We don't know where we're going to be. Just to put it there as a placeholder today, because we don't know where we're going to be. That's all I'm saying.
But
Not
we-
into 2018.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I heard. I thought
Yep.
heard the conversation going someplace along the line here in the last 5 minutes. So, okay,
Yeah, no, I did. If it came, I didn't mean it. I'm saying break it away from some amount of it forward, just for land planning purposes, until we have a better idea where we're at. That's all I was suggesting there.
Hey, Chief, do you have a ideal location that you're looking at? Northeast quarter, east corner, First Avenue extension, Willow Creek Drive? Have you identified something in that area? Is that kind of what you're looking towards?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's, I know they talked about an east one years ago. Was that something in that area or just east somewhere?
Well, east somewhere, and we've gathered some heat maps and stuff, but yeah, I like the thought of, we've looked at some spots and stuff, and we'd sure like to see if one of those spots would already be owned by the city. That's what we'd like to see, and if it doesn't fit what we need, then like you said,
Move on.
We'd like to move on and
Sure.
say, that's not going to work, let's try and find a different spot. So really don't have anything too pinpointed at this point. So.
Sure. Well, I think it's even better if we can nail out the spots that don't work. this will not work for us.
Right,
period.
and especially if we have land that we're thinking is gonna work for that, let's
Yeah.
think it through, and if it's not big enough, you know, maybe look at adjacent properties to expand the site a little bit if we have to, or whatever, if it's an ideal location. That's more important than just having the money so we can jump on something that comes for sale that's maybe not really that perfect.
Right. We're talking a pretty small satellite station, you know. So
Would it be similar to the West Side station then?
no, it'd
Smaller?
be quite a bit smaller. It'd be more like Sioux Falls, one of the Sioux Falls satellite stations. The West Side has a lot of specialized equipment in it and stuff like that. So this would be just a basic fire or fire EMS or just EMS. It would start out at some point and grow. So I think you're talking that 1.5 to 2 acres is what you need for those types of satellite stations. So
So it'd be 2 vehicles, probably an office area and
yeah,
break
pretty
room slash
small.
place for them to bag out.
Can maybe make a suggestion, Sarah? I know you've got some designs on some future long-term planning. That's still fair to say. I'm thinking as we get through some of those processes, this might shake out of that.
Right.
So I guess after this discussion, it's been a good discussion. Stick the way we current do it. The ideas merit. Let's see what shakes out of that, and then I think that might tell us which way to go. And we may end up doing something like that.
Okay. So for now, we'll just kind of leave everything as is, and I think in 2018, if you guys, you know, that might be something you need to do is to either say the city-owned sites will work or they will not work, so that you know whether you have to put money aside and how much in current year, future year. I think that'd be good. So let's move on to ambulance. Most of their technology is on the ambulance, that comes out of the ambulance budget. Just one comment, the ambulances are split out into 2 different line items. One in 2019 is for a new unit. The ones in 2021 and 2023, the plan is right now is to do a remount for those 2. So I think they would buy a new unit, and then the next time it's up, they would do a remount, and then the next time they would do a new unit. So that's kind of where they are in the rotation. And so that's why they're a lesser amount, because you're not replacing the chassis on it. And so I just thought it would be a little bit easier to just have those into 2 different, because we never used to do remounts, we just had new ones. So does anybody have any other questions? There's no capital involved in this because that's all on the fire side. So does anybody have any questions? And also the ambulances, because that is an allowable equipment purchase out of the second penny, those come out of the capital fund versus the general fund.
Chief, you just remount one time, and then at the end of that remount cycle, it's...
Yeah, so that would, our ambulances usually run about a 10-year cycle, and we have 5 of them. So we replace one every other year is what we've been on the schedule for, and that's working out pretty well right now. And the next one that's coming up in 19 would not be, that's a really older unit and would not be a remountable unit. But we really need a new Type 1, the bigger 4-wheel drive unit. They work really well in town. And the Type 3s are the van chassis with the square box. Those work good for an all-around in town and also for interfacility transfer. So on those 5 rigs, they'd have 10 years of new, and then we'd remount that box on a new chassis, and they'd have another 10 years. So technically, if this plan works moving forward, we could save a lot of dollars and get 20 years out of our good, strong boxes that are well built, and they go through them all the way and put them on a new chassis, and the chassis are changing all the time. So, you know, we're using gas ones right now, and we've used diesel in the past. Will that be the way of the future? I guess that changes quite fast, but so far to this point, the remount is working out okay for us, and we're able to save a lot of money over a 20-year cycle.
When you take and send those off for a remount, then you go from 5 ambulances down to 4?
No, we figure in a loaner. They provide us a loaner with a newer type unit that's going to be reliable. So we use that in emergency setting, and it takes about 3 to 4 months for them to do a remount. At least that's the current one we had. Some might take a little bit longer, but worked out pretty good for the most part.
Chief, is there a lot of remanufacturing and to get those mounted from an older chassis to a newer chassis? I mean, are they tearing a lot apart and putting it back together?
Yeah, they really are. It sounds like, well, you could just lift it off and put it on, but they go through in great detail, and a lot of safety stuff they have to redo and put new stuff in, and mounting it onto a brand new chassis. They have to follow certain guidelines and stuff. Really is they'll go through and put new flooring down and new cushions on the seats, and if there's any scratches or anything, they'll replace panels and really the only problem that we've ran into is, depending on who gets the bid, some of your technology you can't bring forward into the new rig because it's from a different manufacturer. So some of your solid state equipment has to get simplified because they can't reuse that equipment. So that's really the only thing we have found so far. But I mean, the price tag is definitely worth continuing to pursue this and make. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't. But it sure seems like it's going to work just fine. So.
Yeah, it's a complete restoration. You wouldn't, when you step into it, you honestly wouldn't know if it's not brand new. It's
so exactly.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Doug. We'll move on to the street department. And I hear the cheers over there. They have a lot of equipment, and it comes at a pretty good price tag. So we try really hard to not have a year where you've got $700,000, another year you have $2. Try to really even it out so we're kind of consistent. And some of this was moved around a little bit because that loader and tractor with mower was cut out of the 2018 budget. And so it was put back into 2019, and so some of this shifted around just a little bit. Does anybody have any questions? The snow removal stuff is on a different. We started kind of tracking the stuff that we purchase because we do snow removal in the snow removal department. It kind of helps to see what the overall cost of removing snow is versus whether we just contract the whole thing out. So there is some other pieces of equipment there as well. But does anybody have any questions? The second page, 19, you'll see that the land and building is in 2021, moved up a year. And that's the same thing that became a budgeted item when Lake Area approached the city looking to possibly purchase that for an expansion project. Not sure where any of that is. I know that it isn't the most ideal build or location for the street department. They're kind of landlocked, and part of the land isn't really usable. So I guess you guys would have to decide, regardless of what Lake Area decides to do, whether it's a good idea to have the street department in a different location where they maybe have a little more room, where they could have a different building configuration, a little more efficiencies. Right now they're kind of stuck where they are and with what they have. But that has remained in there, not really knowing what that end game plan is with Lake Area, and I guess what your guys' feelings are. It's the same amount as what was in there last year. It just moved up a year. So, and I know we've already kind of talked about that in that long-term plan, and I think that's something that you guys are going to want to look at too. Is there another suitable location? Is it a location that the city owns? Is it something that you would want to pursue regardless of what Lake Area determines to do with their expansion plan? You know, I guess you'd want to come up with a purpose for why you're going to spend that money. Is it just because somebody else wants to move into your space, or is it because it's a better fit for the street, city-wide, you know, whatever. So it's in there. It's in 2021. Does anybody have any comments, questions?
Well, the question I have is are we pushing that, or is LATI pushing that? And if LATI is not pushing it, where are we at with our current site and such?
Right. The original, I think what happened originally is Joe Vitek, when she was with the school over there, had talked with Gary or Steve about the possibility of having, I think it was actually for the shooting range, indoor. Does that sound right, Lee? The indoor shooting range? Okay. Well, she had talked with Steve about it. I mean, that was the understanding I had anyway. So Steve had it appraised, the street department, for the school situation, and that was the last I had heard about it. So I don't know if the school still has interest or not for expansion.
Maybe what we need to do is we need to find out from them if there an interest on their part.
Right.
It's hard for us to put dollars out there when we don't know if there's any interest. That seems kind of odd.
Right. You know, he did have, at that time, he had Stanton move forward and set up an appraisal, and it was appraised. The facility was, with the buildings and all. And it's about 5 acres of land with about 3.4 of it outside of the floodplain, I believe, right around in there. So,
Rob, my question to you is, you're kind of landlocked there. I've toured that facility. It's old. You got that big equipment, and there's just not a lot of room in there. It works. It functions. How many years can that site carry you space-wise and facility-wise?
well, right now we'd like to have, one thing that we notice is we have no place to really stockpile. We do have a small stockpile of our chips that we keep there. We try to stockpile some stuff there. It's just not a lot of room for that. The other thing, too, is we have a lot of equipment that sits outside, and we do store equipment out at the airport in the stone hangar. That's the thing, is not enough of our equipment's indoors.
The only other question that comes to mind is, it's right next to a school zone. Is that, you can get these big trucks, is that a big deal?
You know, we generally try to, during the school year, we try to roll out and go out to the highway to the west instead of going east and going by the school. But yeah, certain times of day it is a problem when we have equipment coming in and out. School's getting out, the guys really actually try to avoid coming back to the shop just for that reason.
Go ahead. The condition of the buildings. I mean, what do you see in the next 5 years, 10 years of the buildings?
Right. The two main buildings were built in the 50s. They're uninsulated, they're brick buildings, and heating is expensive. We just don't have enough room for melting the equipment off in the winter. We try to get them indoors, get them warmed up, thaw them out. The cold storage truck shed, we just plug the trucks in every night, but we still do have issues with, at times, getting trucks started, even with them plugged in. So, and it does help when you get them in a warm shop just to thaw out. You go in the morning, you fire up quicker, and you can go instead of having to wait so long for stuff to warm up. So you can have, in the wintertime, we can warm equipment up for a half hour before we dare move it. So when it's in the shop, we can go a lot quicker within a couple minutes or less. So,
Rob, maybe you can answer this at this point, but acreage-wise, as far as land, square footage-wise, as far as buildings, any idea what your needs would be?
Right. Currently, 5 to 8 acres would be nice. If we had 10, we'd have plenty of space for stockpiles of materials. Building-wise, when I originally worked these numbers out, I had about 20,000 square feet, if I recall correctly, for a building, which actually would probably be on the very small side. we wouldn't necessarily need all the 20,000 square feet. If we had that heated, that would be great. If we had another, I don't even know how much, maybe 10,000 square feet of cold storage where we could still keep things indoors that you don't have to have warm in the winter, or, you know, where it's under a roof. Right now, I mean, if you go by the street department or you drove through there, you'd see we have probably, I'd guess, 10 to 15 pieces of equipment outside. And you end up with sun rot too, you know, which, yeah, maybe that's not the biggest thing, but I personally don't like seeing the equipment outside like that.
Just another comment. When I went at Old Dark 30 once and with the crew, and I jumped in with Jeff Riley, it's a race.
Yeah.
That's one thing I learned about that is you watch them go when they're moving snow. It's an absolute race to get it done. And we keep adding streets, and then when you have to go back because cars are in the way, you know. So I just would add that commentary. It's a race to get it done.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments?
That 3.985 million,
Right.
is that remotely close to what it would cost to build something?
It actually, I think I got that number 2 years ago. And how I got that, I actually got a hold of Gray Construction, who had just that year constructed a new DOT facility in Clear Lake. And I've toured that facility. It's very much like what we would like to have for our equipment to be stored in. Plus it had office space inside. And I did check with the Director of Equalization to figure out what land costs would be roughly in different areas. And I did average that out to come up with that number. So I think we came up with like $160 a square foot, I believe. But the difference was the DOT in Clear Lake did put in fuel tanks, which we would not have those. We would not have a need for those. So our cost, at least if we would have done it a couple years ago, would have been cheaper per square foot than the $160.
Can I suggest on this one that let's just leave it as it is? And again, I think what our action item on it has to be is we need to have conversation with LHI to find out what their, is this an interest that they have, or we have no idea right now. I think we need to, before we do anything, we need to know that. So I think as an action item, certainly before the next budget year, that's something we need to know exactly where we sit with that.
You know, back when that all came up, it seemed like more of a pushback then, because Steve and I think Randy and myself, Steve wanted to go look at some facilities. He had talked about the West 212 facility, the old, I think Spivak had it. It's sold now. Actually, Watertown Development Company had it for a while. Now it just got sold. It's a trailer place out there. We never did actually go look at that, but we did look at ASOF's facility out east. The mayor and I had, and Randy. And so there was a pushback then, but as far as I understand, it was a push from Joe Vitek when she was with the school. So I didn't know much more than that. So, but yeah, that's what we'll have to do.
Sounds like you knew more than some people.
Yeah. More than Lee, anyway. Oh, and by the way, he threatened to tase me if I took too long up here, so.
Well, we better speed that along, although I would probably pay to see that. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I think we got about 40 questions for you, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
Just to make sure that gets done.
Get to see me get tased here.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the crash test
Well,
dummy.
you're wearing yellow, so
Oh,
that's a pretty good target right there. Yeah. Okay. We can move on to snow removal. Like I said, part of like the dump trucks with the plows and sanders, snow box inserts, the motor graders. Those are purchased out of the snow removal budget. Even though they can be used year round, we do have more of them because of the snow removal effort. And so we did take, if you notice, we did just take and spread out the dump trucks. I think overall we removed one from the 5-year rotation and just kind of spread them out so that we didn't have such a hard hit because that's just not something that can be sustained even in a good sales tax year to buy $800,000 worth of equipment in just one department. So it's just always better to kind of spread that out. So does anybody have any questions on that?
How many trucks do you have, Rob?
Currently, I think we have 11 with dump boxes.
Including
Working on
the new
12
one?
right now. Actually, that'd be, I think, our 12th one.
And we're looking at replacing one per year, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I had the opportunity to sit in yesterday afternoon. Obviously, you were there, Rob, and the mayor was there, and a few other street department people, listening to the street superintendent from Sioux Falls, Galen Huber, and one of his key people came along too, talking about their snow removal plan down there. And that was very impressive, and I thought I'd be just wouldn't get much out of it. It was very informative, and I think got some good tips out of it, and pretty impressive operation down there.
Yeah, it was an excellent meeting. I learned a lot yesterday from Galen Huber and was it the Public Works Dean? I can't think of his title. He was in the Public Works Department, but anyway, they had a lot of information. It was interesting. So.
Okay. We can move on. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Lee, for not tasing him. Probably be a work comp incident, wouldn't it? Okay, we can, we'll take it a little bit out of order. Cemetery and forestry fall under the Park and Rec department, because why not? You guys seem to be the poster child for every 1, 2, 3, not it. Okay, it goes to the Park and Rec. So these two are funded in the general fund. With the cemetery, just their basic equipment replacement. Under their capital improvement, they do have some money in to rebuild, repair roads, and then in 2021 to do a different office. Does anybody have any questions, or do you want Jay or Terry to come up and talk about any of the capital items?
I just have a comment. We've got a very well-maintained cemetery, but I have occasion once or twice a year to stick my head in the office to find out where somebody's buried, and that office is in sad shape out there. It reflects very poorly for us as a community. That boy, I'd like to see this go through when the time comes, because we need it.
I just have one question. That mower snowblower, is that a mower snowblower combo, where a blower goes on the front of a snowblower, or is that a mower and a snowblower with the front on it? PTO driven.
That would be an attachment to the mower.
Okay.
The snowblower would actually be an attachment to the mower.
PTO driven, I take it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the only question I got.
I assume the old one died? That was it.
If there's no other questions, we can move on to animal control. And there really is, if this is a department you want to pick on, Dan, you can go ahead and pick on this one right here. Yeah. So it basically just the taser, and it is a replacement because I was told he already has one, correct? Yep. So we're not giving him anything new. This is replacing, and there was, I believe, a computer that was in 2019, I believe, and that's getting replaced because it broke sooner than what was anticipated. And so that's why that one was removed. So that's really all they have in their department. Under forestry, in 2019, they put the chipper back. That was a 2018 item that got removed. They also have a dump truck, and if you'll look, the last dump truck they got, I believe they got from another department, correct? And so that one we do have as a donated from another department. These are pieces of equipment that, and this is another one that's out of the general fund. And sometimes in some of those years when you have to cut budgets, it's hard to keep some of this stuff in. So anytime that we could utilize something from another department always makes it a lot easier. On the tractor with loader, that one is in to replace that out of general fund revenues. Not sure if there just isn't enough of those around or if they're not in good enough shape, but if you look at the revenue sources, they're coming from two separate. And then under the capital, that's the boulevard trees that they'll plant and replace and sell. You'll sell some to people, right, at cost, and then you use them also to replace some of ours in the parks. And that's been, I think it was 12, and then we moved it up to 15 just for inflationary purposes, and it's been 15 for a few years now, and that's just something that every year gets budgeted and basically gets used. I mean, you don't
We do
leave a
use
whole
that
lot.
level every year?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
close. If you
All
look
right.
at historical numbers, yeah, they come close. And some years, depending on how many you take out or how many issues you have or how many the people want to buy, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But
Yes, generally we come real close to using the $15,000. Normally, the spring order, which we're putting together right now and would like to get some quotes back yet in September, that's for 270 trees normally, and it's in that $11,000 range that we pay. And then, we still have a little left over that we can do some fall plantings on some trees too. So there's funds available to do that.
Jay, is it a fair statement that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the emerald ash borer gets here? That's going to decimate an awful lot of trees in town, that we're going to see a bigger dollar need at that point.
At that point, but probably the bigger dollar need will be the urgent removal of the green ash that are affected. Because once it hits and we identify those trees, we got about 2 to 3 year window that they'll have to come down because they become very brittle and hazardous from the research that I've done.
Jay, have we, a year or so, well, I think it was a year ago in budget time, we talked about establishing a larger city nursery.
Exactly, and we are working on that just at our staff meeting Tuesday and at our Park and Rec Board meeting, last Park and Rec Board meeting that was on the agenda too, to just determine where that location, that ideal location may be. And we haven't determined that yet. We're tentatively right now looking at some areas, probably out in the Derby Downs area and in the Cattail Crossing Golf Course area. Probably on some of Todd's land on the airport property. We'll have to talk about it.
Do we have quite a few of those ash trees? I mean, are you replacing them as fast as you can?
Well, we're not replacing them. We are replacing basically what Junior and the forestry department are doing. If, we got an ash in the boulevard and somebody calls and complains about it, ashes aren't questioned. They're just cut off at ground level. And, but yeah, we have an awful lot of ash in the community, and it would be something else. City Park would look like a desert because it's all ash out there.
Most of the city will.
And all through the city, correct.
I heard a statistic at a Lake Area Zoological Society meeting here from the state forestry personnel that spoke that day. I think he estimated that 55% of the trees in Watertown are ash trees that would be affected by this when it gets here.
I would say that would be very close, if not a little low.
That tractor in there, Jay, that we're looking at replacing, how big a tractor is that? Is it a large tractor?
Yeah, that's a larger loader tractor that you would see working with the tree removal project. And the reason we didn't want to use one there, we're dealing with a lot of heavy logs and kind of clumsy, so we want a pretty good piece of equipment that's pretty safe and secure. The dump trucks, if we can get them through Rob, that's if we can repurpose them, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a tree mover, right? Whatever you call those.
Good question. Mike, do you have a tree spade?
Yes and no. I bought a
Well, the reason why I bring that up is I know we spend a fair amount all the time paying to have trees moved, don't we?
Oh, absolutely, because it's a company out of Brookings that basically come and he does a great job.
Does a
Yeah.
great job, but we spend a lot of money
Oh,
with that, and
absolutely.
there's going to be a day when we do that a lot more than we do today. It's kind of like we get a piece of equipment for cutting down the trees? Did we get it from utilities or somebody a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Bucket truck.
We got another bucket
That's
truck.
been
yeah.
a great asset
Oh,
to
absolutely.
us. And I would, somewhere in this budget process, if we've got one that's worthy of being reworked or looked at sometime in the future for a
Trade-in,
purchase,
yeah.
we should be looking at that. I really do think.
Okay.
Any other questions on forestry? Okay. Thanks, Jay. We'll move to library, and I see Dee Dee did make it. She had a library board meeting this evening, so we held off. So, yeah. Well, ditto. So, on the technology, if you look, the fines fund, which is that Fund 226, that's used for the technology purchases. And then under the other, there's a replacement of 10 chairs in a kind of a boardroom, community room, or meeting room, and then the materials budget. The only change that was made is there's a 3-year or 3% increase per year for an inflationary cost on the materials budget, and we just because the 2018 number was changed, we just changed the 2019 to 2023 to reflect that 3% increase based off the 2018 number. And that comes out of the general fund revenues under the regular library budget. Does anybody have any questions? No?
I do. How old is the library building?
We just would celebrate 10 years this year. Is that? Oh,
there you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. This July would be 10 years for our new building. Yes.
So with that being 10 years old, are you going to see some projects coming up with carpet replacement and roof and?
That is absolutely correct. Carpet replacement is kind of on my timeline, but with the current schedule of the budget and the process, I don't think I could bring that up with solid numbers until next year. So that's something we'd probably see in the future. We also would like to try to get some professional cleaning done, see if that will help with that before launching into an investment of new flooring. Because at this point, we haven't done that.
Have we looked going away from carpet to a solid surface that doesn't hold as much dirt and water and things of that nature?
Yes, that is something we're considering. The concerns with that are
Slipping.
solid surfaces are expensive and slipping in the winter. And because we have a lot of open hours, we'd have a lot of librarians mopping. And then there are also noise concerns with hard surfaces in libraries. So it's not that we wouldn't consider it, it's just that's what we've already been thinking of at this time. And then another option was carpet tiles. So those can
Replace
be replaced
them,
one
yeah.
at a time rather than a huge amount of carpet at one time. So those are some things that we've been discussing and are on the table, but we're not ready to present to council for this year.
Because I know the commercial grade tile, like the 12-inch by 12-inch tile, are pretty sturdy.
Yes, and
But-
I think the tile we have is that grade.
Okay. Carpet you can do up to, I believe, it's 4 foot by 4 foot for
In the carpet tiles?
Yes.
I'm not an expert on carpet tile.
I put some in, so.
Thank you. Thanks for the info.
And they're not bad. I'll be over to put some tile in.
Adam's coming to replace tile.
Any other questions for library or library fines fund? Okay. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Thank you very much.
We'll go to building services, and again, it's basically just the computers and the field inspection notebooks. Any questions on those?
We've been going for 2.5 hours. Anybody need a break? Let's take a short break.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we get the updates from Mara and Elsa on the girl side.
Okay. Moving right along.
Michelle, we got 45 minutes to get done.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not feeling the best, so don't expect complicated answers from me. All right, we're going with Park and Rec. We'll start with supervision. Again, it's basically the admin staff, just computers, copiers, printers when they're needed. That's all taken care of by Spencer. Recreation programs. Again, they have some equipment that they routinely replace, some every year, some every 2 years. The hockey equipment got moved around just a little bit. It got bumped out of 2018, and so it got moved into 2019, and then they just moved the other two to coincide with every other year. The indoor shuffleboard court, that also got taken out of 2018 and moved into 2019. On the capital portion of it, they have, and I'll probably just have either Terry or Jay, whoever knows, just talk about the pump track, the inflatable theater, climbing wall, what your thoughts are on that, and I know that you guys kind of moved two of them around a little bit from what your original request was, so you want to just real briefly just talk about those three items and what you're going to do with them, where you're going to put them.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. Pump track is strictly, we're looking at two locations right now. One with the new skate park. We're considering adding on a expansion of a pump track, which would be to the east, closer to Cook Complex. Those that are not familiar with the pump track, it's a new trend in recreation. It's pedalless biking. You use momentum up and down different hills. The 30,000 would be for a dirt track. Obviously, that would not do a concrete track, but very huge, popular now. Going from the West Coast, East Coast, and we're finally getting it here. Just a very huge trend in recreation. The current skate park will probably work as a pump track currently, but it's not the size or length that typically you see. I don't know if you've heard of the word or Strider bikes. It's an adult Strider. Basically, it's an exercise. It's momentum. It's up and down curves. Majority of our communities around us, from Brookings, Rapid, Aberdeen, all have pump tracks. We're kind of late to the show, but that would be the second location. Really is not known at this point, but we think it'd be a great asset at the new skate park. I don't know, Jay, if you want to jump in on that one or that.
No, just to let you know too, the skate park is finished. The construction of the skate park is finished. We still need to do the landscaping that we took on the responsibility to complete, but Evergreen Skate Park's moved out today, and the concrete skate park is completed.
Is that open then?
Kind of.
On my way here, I counted 10 cars in the parking lot. So the fence is down, therefore it's open, but we are going to have some signage put up while we're finishing the construction. Todd Walker from the golf course agreed to do the dirt work with the Bobcat, just because he's excellent on that piece of machinery. So we hope to have the final grading done, seeded here in the next 7 to 10 days. Rob's going to bring in some black dirt, I think it's coming from the airport. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we did communicate on one thing today. So, but no, that is done. It looks like it's open. And not much we can do to keep them off. It's ready to go. It's just we don't want dirt, mud, rock being brought in from the foot traffic with the rough construction left over. Any question on the pump track? I know it's probably new for a lot of people to hear that term, but definitely a trend. Moving on to
Terry.
Yeah.
Hindsight's always 20/20, but should that have been designed as part of the skate park?
We originally in our design meetings it was. But financially, when we looked at the dollars available and what the extra expense was to include a pump track, we just feasibly cannot do it. Because most pump tracks you see now are dirt, where obviously this skate park need to be concrete. And that's where your huge costs are incurred. I'm not saying you can't phase it out, phase 2, phase 3, turn that dirt into concrete. But all we're looking right now is to shape, it's almost like a BMX track, but it's got enough high points, low points where momentum just keeps you going around. But it was discussed as part of the original, and when we found out how many dollars we had available and just the cost of the skate park we built, if you remember a couple of months ago at the council level, we had a discussion, we had a decision to make whether we could afford it as designed. So that's kind of where that's at. Any other questions on pump track? If not, moving on to the next item, that inflatable theater, $20,000. That's been in the budget probably 10, 12 years and keeps getting moved back. And what that is, it's a substitute for the old outdoor movie theaters. The difference is this is air inflated. It has an FM modulator, so you pull up whether with your headphones or car, you turn it to a certain radio station, you get the sound of the movie. They're big. Sioux Falls does them 2-3 times a week in a different park where they'll play a movie. You pull in a car, you pull in with your headphones, put a blanket down, and you got an outdoor movie theater. And that's what an inflatable theater would be. Like I said, it's been pushed back. I think this was early 2000s that this concept came about. We just kept pushing it back due to budget constraints. So next one will be a climbing wall, $30,000. This was actually set, I believe, in 18. It just moved forward through the process. The reason we keep pushing this back is really we do not have a location. We do see the need, but this was a standalone. This wasn't a wall type. This was a separate tower. If you've ever been like Brookings Wellness Center, you'll see they have standalone rock towers. That's what this was. We didn't design it into the new wellness center. The auditorium obviously is up in the air. We don't know the long term. The field house, we don't have the space, the turf, too valuable for everything else. So we don't have a location, but we know there's a need. And the mayor when we talked, there's a new trend going away from climbing walls, more to this, American Ninja Warrior style courses versus just, I don't know if you've seen it on TV, the different obstacle courses. So we're just putting it way back in the budget, not knowing that may become one that just disappears if we can't find a location or if the demand for that type of recreation is gone. We just need to do some research and some questionnaires to our patrons to see if that's still a want.
Any other questions on the recreation? Okay, otherwise we'll move on to golf course. They did a little bit of movement on some of the equipment, and but mainly just their standard equipment replacements. On the capital improvement portion of it, they do have some different course renovations every other year. They put some money in the budget for the road closure. I know that's been talked about for a few years now. Some money in to maybe do a redesign. I'm not sure of I'm not sure of what that is. You guys can maybe speak more. And then the maintenance shop. I know that's been in the long term and has moved the extent of the project and how much of it and the amount. So you just want to go through quick what those course renovations are in those 3 years, and then when you say campus remodel, what exactly are you looking for from some architect or engineer, and then what's your latest maintenance shop upgrade?
Okay, the $150,000 in 19 and 20 is primarily focused on all bunker replacement. They're old. They're not lined, therefore the sand cannot withhold the edging. It drops down. The sand that's in those is not really designed golf bunker sand. It's kind of a secondary. It's just not the right product for that. Those were in 16 to 17. We moved them back. In 18, we focused on 2 greens, but those $250,000 would be the 27 holes worth of bunkers. I don't have a number how many we have to do, but that was even part of the vision committee that we had for 6 months that came up. Is that a priority? 2021, the $350,000, that would be primarily in the blue course. The blue course, we still have 3 push-up greens, which are original to the course, so we're talking 80 years. The play is so much different than the new modern greens, the PGA greens we put in. If you're familiar with the golf course, that would be blue 1, blue 2, I believe blue 8, Mike, if blue 1 and 2, and then there was one of the newer ones that was not made to spec. That would have to be cored out. So there would be those 3 greens in addition to other just modifications, short-term, smaller projects on blue that we've identified through the Vision Committee. That's why you'll see that jump in that amount from the traditional 150 up to 350. Then the 45, the campus remodel discussed, it's not engineering. If we were able to close that road, if everybody's familiar with what we're referring to, there's the road that goes between cart storage and the clubhouse. What our preference would be for safety and functionality would be to close that road off, loop that traffic back around on the back side of the cart storage, which Golf Course Road actually goes on. There's already an established road there. What we would do is close off and create the campus would become a new parking lot. So we're probably talking an overlay to tie in parking lots from the clubhouse to cart storage with an entrance on both sides of that road.
Can I make a suggestion? This thing has been talked about for many, many years, and probably more so the last 2-3 years. I think we need to lay that out, and we need to get some public input out there for those people that are on, what is it, South Lake Drive, to get their input. Like I said, that gets asked actually every summer. Yeah. People ask you about it. I think we need to get some detail to it a little bit, and not that we don't have to go hire an architect. We got the people that can do that, but we can do some public input with those people that live along there, because that's going to change the traffic route right in front of their houses.
Yeah, and that's definitely, the pushback. I won't call it pushback when this was brought up. Like you said, it's been brought up multiple times. I remember the last time it was pursued very seriously. There was some concerns by those homeowners on South Lake Drive about that. Definitely it's going to expand your traffic flow in front of your residents. And we can work with Shane, to look at how. But I mean, it's an established road. It meets all the regulations. It's not like we're taking it on a private road. It's a city street. But maybe we have to look at it and see with the amount of increase in traffic. Because I think right now all you see people going through there is probably those 5 to 6 residents. Other than that, everybody's cutting through the clubhouse campus. So,
what we might be able to do on that is where the current road is that goes by them. We might be able to give them some space there where our road goes, and that might help appease that. But I would say we kind of need to get a plan together, because, like I said, it's been talked about, and you can draw it on a napkin, but we need to get really the devil's in the details to where we go on that.
Yeah. Right. Well, I second that. I go through there at least twice every day. In fact, it's even to the point now I'll loop around that to avoid that, because it's congested, it's dangerous. It's 15 mile an hour speed limit, but I know good and well, and there's speed bumps in there, but there's still people cruising through. They're more than 15 mile an hour. You got kids out there, you got carts out there, people walking across. And there's a lot of traffic goes through there too, and it is definitely a safety factor. Granted, it's only for a few months out of the year, but I would definitely like to see something done out there too. Granted, the South Lake Drive people aren't going to be crazy about it, but definitely need to be looking at it.
Want to just touch on the maintenance shop real quick?
Maintenance shop, what do we got in there, Shelley? 100,000?
100,000, yep.
Talking with Todd, what that would be an extension to the current shop that we built 10 to 12 years ago. Just equipment, storage space, we're maxed out, so this would be an addition to the existing shop. It would be heated storage. It would be part of the current shop. It wouldn't be anything, it wouldn't be a separate building. It would be an add-on, just because we're maxed out on space for, as Rob alluded to earlier, we got $60,000-$80,000 piece of equipment that right now we're putting outside. And that kind of investment, we would rather see that indoors. So it's just a matter of we've outgrown the space. That shop is put up with an 18-hole golf course. We have 27 holes now, which means more equipment, different things like that. So that would simply be an addition to the current shop.
Roughly,
And it would also allow us to add a legal vented chemical storage area for our fertilizers, herbicides, and fungicides and that type of thing as well.
what size would you be looking on add on? What's the current size of the building, roughly?
Current, I believe, what are we, 40 by 100, 40 by 80? Roughly, you know, so it'd be probably, I would say, equivalent to a fourth of the building, so 40 by 60 addition, roughly that, 40 by 40. You know, and I don't know that. I mean, that's throwing it out there, Adam.
Okay.
I'm not completely sure. It's how far will the money go? You know,
Sure.
we get engineer estimates on what can we get for 100,000 and maximize those dollars.
What's in the steel shed that sits east of the clubhouse?
A lot of the old existing shop is a lot of our fertilizer storage, just different from our fertilizers, grass seed, bunker sand, things like that that are out in the original shop. Things that we don't want to tie into fuel, you know, our fuel tanks are outdoors there, but it's strictly a cold storage building. Some piece of equipment we may use twice a year is out there, but majority of it is our fertilizers, our seeds, our pesticides, that kind of thing.
Any other questions on golf course? Okay, we'll move on to Family Aquatic Center. Not a lot, just routine. Their computers, they do deck furniture. They replace a certain amount of that every other year. Tubes, same thing. Just normal wear and tear. On the long-term capital, additional slide. This has been in the long term, moved around, been requested in the current year and pushed back. Just something that's there to keep people wanting to come, give them something new, give them another attraction. On this one, would you have to change anything or expand the aquatic center? Because this is an additional slide, or is this a replacement of a slide?
This would be an additional slide. For years, we had a wave pool that was coming closer and closer. We just felt we were completely landlocked, and for an 80-day season, the $2.8 million investment was not what we wanted to do. So we did a survey with our consumer, and they top 10 listed of what things they'd like to see. Number 2 on the list, besides the wave pool, was more slides. To answer Shelley's question, what this would be is potentially, it would be another story to our slide tower, would be an add-on, and our footings are structurally sound to do that, but it would not be any type of new pool. This is what they call a speed slide. If you're familiar, it's the ones that just do zero gravity straight down, and they go into a run out. They don't enter into a pool. You slowly come to a stop. You get out, get off on the edge. So that would be the case. We wouldn't have to do any additional, drop down pools, anything like that. It would be just tied into our current. The water would come from our current pool we tie in, so it would be minimum cost. But to get the height for a speed slide, it needs to be about 3 stories high. Our current slide tower is 2 stories, so it would either be for $230,000. We couldn't do a separate staircase level, so they would just add on one more tier to that to get to the speed slide, which would enter in its own, just run out. There would be an underground tank, but you wouldn't see it, which would recycle that water back to the top.
So it'd be on the southeast corner of that?
There's 2 options. We could, run along 2nd Street, or it would be in the southeast, but the run out would either run along 2nd back towards, Kiefer Chiropractic, or it could run along 212 along the fence back towards Thunder Road. It all depends on how the engineer would lay it out. So, and 2012 is the last time we did a major renovation, and we seen at that point when we put that, and that was at in-water playground with the dump bucket. We were down on attendance to about 35,000 a summer. We put that in, we grew back up to 50,000, and we've seen annually we lose about 5,000. Right now we're back to about that 35,000 annual visitors. So you'll see that spike when you add a new addition. It's just important, people come and ride the lazy river so many times, do the same slides so many times, and the interest level drops. So, we always said 7 to 10 years, you want to put some kind of feature in there to reestablish that interest. So,
Any other questions? Those will move on to softball, baseball complex. On this one, basically everything is under the long-term capital. There's outfield lighting for foundation, outfield lighting for Cook, ball field fences. Not sure what ball field that is. Got a few of them now. And then new playground system at the Premier Field. On that one, I didn't put it in, but it's important to remember that anytime there's a new development with the Park and Rec Board, they either donate land or they donate cash, correct? And anytime they give cash, that goes into a restricted cash account for park development. That's what that cash is for, is to develop a park if they don't give you land for a park. And so there is money in that has slowly been growing. I can't remember, did I say there's 80-some thousand?
I think so.
Never been used in the 13 years I've been here, but it is there and it is available. So this $60,000 could be used with that restricted cash money in that park development under the Park and Rec Fund. So that is an option. If it comes to 2019 and it looks like, money is a little bit tight, that's what that money's been accumulating there for. And I told Jay, just kind of being new, that's something that the Park and Rec Board really needs to be conscientious of, is to really promote maybe getting that donation so that the city can determine where they think a park should go and what it should look like, and there's money available to do that when the city's ready to put in a park, versus saying, well, this is land we really don't want, so we'll give you that, versus the cash value of what that could be, to really kind of come up with maybe a master plan for where parks should be located. But anyway, there is that restricted cash account that I don't know if people just don't remember it's there, or we just haven't developed a park in the time that I've been here. But I would encourage you to look at that if you do develop a new park.
And I think also with the playground at the new Premier Fields at Lake Erie Slow Pitch, and some of the softball associations, they'll be looking at participating in that project as well.
Yep.
And the lighting projects, they're kind of placeholders from previous years. We've kind of stretched out the lighting at Cook Complex. That's for the 4 original fields built in the 70s, and that's also where the fencing comes in for the old fields dating back to the 70s. And we got them put in here as individual fields over 4 years, but that could be a 1-year process, because that might reduce the costs and allow for multiple use of poles to light multiple fields. One pole could be lighting 2 fields along the way. And most of these costs are based on when we lighted Field 4 at Foundation Fields in 2016. The total cost for that project was $176,000, so that's kind of where we're basing our pricing from for lighting projects.
Jay, just out of curiosity, the lighting that you use, is it still the old style or is it LED?
This would be the new LED.
Is that cheaper, more expensive?
Probably initially a little more expensive, but operating would be more reasonable.
Any other questions? As we move to Auditorium Fieldhouse. More of this for the protective flooring, screen, turf. That's more for the field house. That's where they use most of that. That is replacement of what they currently have. Under the long-term capital, the auditorium replacement, is that, what improvements was that?
On the 79.5?
Yeah.
That was the sewer replacement in addition to the roof.
Okay.
That was a combined total for the 79.5.
And that's been something that we've pushed back.
We keep pushing back,
Yeah.
and we keep pushing them back for the unknown future. of the building, so.
Okay. And then the rink renovations, that's really dependent on the new facility. I know that there was 1.5 total in there, and it was cut down to 500,000. And again, it is all dependent on what purpose that building is, whether the city feels that you want to hang on to that, whether there's a purpose for it, and what you're going to turn it into. So just a placeholder for that remembrance that, you know, once a new facility, you have the current one that you're going to want to make a determination of whether you want to keep it or whether you don't, what you want it to be. So something that hasn't been in there previously, but probably should have, as long as we've, you know, known that there's a new facility that has been anticipated. So at least a placeholder and something to have a discussion on. Anybody have any questions on that?
Not a question, but a comment. This isn't the time to get into lengthy discussion on it, but on the auditorium, whether it's a committee to discuss it or bring it before a work session, which we had about a year and a half ago, we just can't keep kicking that can down the road and not get a decision made what we're going to do with that facility. And I'd strongly suggest that we take a hard look at what the future of that building relative to we the city is concerned.
And just one comment I would have too on the protective flooring. That would actually be new, and that would be for the forecourts at the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, that we would have a covering if we wanted to bring some gun show, some event like that in, that we would have protective covering over the forecourts.
Can I ask a question on the renovation of the Moss facility? And it really pertains really more towards the proposed ice facility, but new ice facility. But is our desire to have a larger field house, does that a motivating factor for us to create a whole new facility for ice? Does that make sense, that question? In other words,
I mean,
is that part of our...
I don't think the motivation to get the second or the new rink with 2 sheets of ice was based on trying to get that building for a second field house. It was after the discussion of getting 2 sheets, staff discussions of what do we do with the current one. We found 7,000 square foot at our current field house, the old armory, just does not meet the need. I mean, it's been a great asset to the community, but 7,000 square feet versus 19. That's the reason as staff we said if we do get the second ice arena, that would be our preference. But obviously, we don't know who makes those decisions, what that building's going to become. Our preference would be a larger field house, just because we've seen the 7-month indoor demand for that facility.
Well, and I know that the question kind of came across as negative, but there's the flip side of that, which is positive, which is, should that be part of our decision-making process for the new ice facility? That need. Because to put $500,000 into that facility and have it done and have that purpose is pretty cheap overall. That's pretty cheap square footage. So, so there's the flip side of that is, should it enter in our decision-making process as to what we do? From the positive standpoint.
From the positive standpoint, I would say definitely yes. I mean, if you talk to the soccer association, the baseball association, private teams, traveling teams, workouts, the people that utilize that building, we should have had this thing 10 years ago, and 7,000 square foot. Just our soccer association with 500 to 600 kids, we're filling those doors from 3:30 p.m. to 11 at night, 7 days a week, full days, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Saturday, Sunday, with a waiting list of 20 more teams that want in there. So it should be a motivating factor that, we're in South Dakota. We're indoors a lot, and we have found that, what a honey hole for soccer, baseball, softball teams. We've had cross fitness classes. We've had dry land training for figure skating clubs. It's just been an amazing asset, but only 7,000 square foot, doesn't go real far. That's a court and a half of basketball. So I do think on my end, from within the department, I'd love to see it as a motivating factor to get that much square footage.
Terry, would you say that's probably one of the more utilized facilities that you guys have?
Oh, at this point, yeah, definitely. You know,
So if we added 19,000, I mean, it's not just gonna sit there, it's gonna get used.
No, it would not sit there. I mean, like I said, people now call in July to try and get in the field house for February because they've found that, you know, you don't call a week before because it's booked up. And the only thing, you know, like the baseball, things like that, part of the training for that off season, you know, is long toss to get your arm in shape. At 100-foot length from wall to wall, you're not really getting your arm in much shape. You know, there, not only the ice rink, now you add archery, you add golf lessons, you add working with the school district on strength training, indoor football practices. The options are limitless. You know, there's full field soccer versus playing sideways at 50 foot. So, but yeah, I would say besides the auditorium before the wellness center was built, it's by far our greatest asset. For a minimal, like Mike said, you know, I think we put about 150,000 into transforming that from an armory to a field house. I mean, one of the best spent money that in all the years I've been with the city that we've spent for such a, and that's even the 500,000 with the ice arena. You know, you're not going to build a field house for 500,000. And one of the big costs is really heating. Obviously, we don't have heat in the ice arena. You know, that's one of the bigger costs is to get a heating system for the winter months. So, but no.
Thanks, Terry.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to zoo. The first page just shows their technology needs, vehicles, zoo animals. They always plan for zoo animals. Sometimes they can get loaners through the AZA program. Others they have to purchase, depending on if there's anything they can borrow or whether they want to keep it for an extended period of time. The otter was something that was purchased, and it was amazing to me how expensive otters are. Crazy. I'm serious. You know, we got a deal for $2,500, but they go for $5,000 to $7,000 for a little baby otter. I thought he was kidding, and I'm like, "Are you serious?" Yeah. I don't know, but so he was really proud of the fact that he got a great deal, which is great for the city. He must have connections, but always a need there. Like I said, sometimes it gets used, sometimes it doesn't, but it's something that's needed. Can't really have a zoo if you don't have animals. So the capital improvement plan is on the next page, page 33. The animal care building is in on 2022. I know that was talked about, and that was going to be a shop with an animal care building. I know the shop is a higher priority, and that was talked about in the 2018 budget. But I think there's still that need for an overall one-stop shop animal care building. Does anybody have any other questions about anything else that's in the long-term plan as far as projects?
Shelley, that parking lot, 26 stalls, is that something new that's come, or have we been pushing that back for a long time?
That would be new.
That's a
That
newer.
would be in addition for employee parking. When we put up the new maintenance and shop building, that would allow for employee parking in that area as well as some visitor parking. With the zoo as well as the two shelters in Bramble Park, we get a lot of parking congestion over there, and this would allow a few more spaces for visitors as well as for employees.
Is there much more room after that for parking if you were to put in 26 more?
Not really on the zoo grounds themselves. You'd probably have to go into the park area towards the south.
It gets full quickly.
It does.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we will move to ice arena. 2019 is to replace the ice resurfacer. That's something that that's been in the back and forth in the budget for a few years. I think it was put off because of the new building, and then new rink, FF&E, probably something that will end up as part of the building cost itself, unless there's some additional FF&E that you guys were thinking of, other than to outfit the new building. But probably something that at the time the building is constructed, it'll probably go into there. Not much. Does anybody else have any questions?
Do we actually have the building in the long-term plan? Is it on the 20?
It's in 2018. The ice, the 2 sheets of ice is in the 2018 budget for capital. Yep.
Perfect.
So moving on to park systems. They have picnic tables that was put back in. It was an item that was removed from the 2018 budget, along with the loader. Under the long term, of course, we have the $175,000 each year that's put in for the trail expansion. I expect that once that plan is done, you guys contracted with an engineering firm to get some of that. I think some of those questions will be answered. So I'm guessing next year at this time, when you're having these long-term CIP questions, you're going to have a whole lot more information, and you can make some of those decisions on what you guys want to do to get that finished, where your priorities are. Because I do believe there's some little chunks that need to be added. There's some chunks that need to be redone, replaced. So I think as you're getting that done, you're going to want to start coming up with kind of a replacement or a maintenance type plan. I know we have never really done a really great job of following through and having a good maintenance program, but I think just like the street department, I think you need to start investigating into a really good maintenance trail program and start putting that into your O&M budget a little bit, probably more than it is right now.
Yeah, we use about $13,000 a year right now, and that's primarily for crack sealing and that type of thing. Would like to hopefully get some quotes for the area by the clubhouse, which is in really bad shape right now, and hopefully get that repaired yet this summer with that budget money. But yeah, we have a lot of areas where we need to tie trail together and then make some repairs.
Yep.
Shelley,
So
how much money is in that account right now for that 3.5 miles that's left?
Well, I think what we've accumulated is
It's
600
and some right now.
Yeah, last time I checked it was 640 something, because it took so many years to get, whenever you get state money or federal money, it takes 4 years to get a portion of a trail done. So we accumulated money while we were waiting for that Memorial Park trail to get done. And
we
so,
did also pay for the Memorial Park Trail in the last year.
Right. So this will just, keep adding to that. And then the money that was contracted with that engineering firm will come out of this trail development money too.
I don't know as we anticipate that being a course of action, but by the same token, I don't think we can totally discount it. Let's say that when we get our engineering study, I mean, there might be some possible economies of scale if we were to look at trying to bite it off and do the whole thing at once. I mean, if that were the case, I mean, that's something that, if we could save several $100,000 by doing it in one fell swoop, I mean, that's something that we can't totally discount either. But again, it'll depend upon what that study tells us, but that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think that's come up in previous budget, because, this has been in here since I've been here, and it was here a few years before I got here. So it's just one of those things, and $175,000 doesn't go very far anymore. It's amazing how expensive trails are to build. And so I know it's come up, well, how much is it going to take to get this thing done? Can we just put it in there and get it done? We've never really had a good answer for that. And I think we've done the more manageable parts of this trail, and I think we're to the icky part of getting this trail done. And so I don't think it's going to be a cheap endeavor, but you can't, we talked about it and said there's just no way to put a number to that even without doing that. So that was kind of the next step, and we, in talking, Jay and I kind of had some conversations, and to make any changes to it, it just didn't seem to make sense until you actually had those numbers. And but yeah, I think that's one of the things they're looking at is, do you take it in chunks? Do you take it all as one? Do you take it in segments? Do you, but those are, at least you'll have a little more information and somewhere to go. I don't know, kind of like the clubhouse or the golf course improvements. I don't know that that's something that will ever go away, because you're always going to have those maintenance issues, kind of like this trail. There's always going to be parts of trail that you're going to want to either expand or you're going to start redoing because they're 15, 20 years old. So I don't know if it's something you're ever going to get rid of, but eventually it'd be nice to just be a maintenance line item, like the roads, versus constantly trying to get trails done.
I think Glenn's right on, though, as far as getting this thing done as soon as possible, because I heard another story a guy told me this week. Truck went by, this lady was in the ditch with her child, pushing a stroller of some kind. Truck went by, she pulled back on, she got back on the road again, didn't realize this guy was right there. He said by the grace of God, he could pull into the other lane and not hit her. And it's just, she was walking in the ditch because the truck was coming at her. So she's in the ditch, she didn't realize the car is coming behind. He said he swerved out, missed the lady, missed the kid. What would that have cost? Loss of a life or two. Yeah, I just think we are really missing the boat on that, of that safety issue out there. It is so dangerous, and we've all been there. We all know it, and it is icky. I know there's a lot of stuff, but that's why we've got to get it fixed too, because it's icky for walking and riding and anything else. So I think that we really need to look at that, I think, and get it done.
Well,
and then
and
start
I-
fixing
yeah.
it.
Well, that's why I'm so excited that we got the study in place now, and over the next 6 months, they're gonna be doing that, and, looking at all the alternative routes, and we may find that, some selected route may be cheaper than what we were looking at. There's gonna be a lot of things looked at, and a lot of public input. That's what's so exciting about this, and hopefully that, when we get to that February, March time period, we'll have a real good idea of where we want to go to get the trails completed around Lake Compesca.
Is there any other questions about the capital projects under the park systems?
Just a real brief, the Sioux River portion of that, what that actually entails is more of a Sioux River Greenway restoration program. The river through town looks really tough, and if we look at 14th Avenue North, kind of an entry area to the community, and the river looks really tough in there, but this is more than that. We're going to look at all sorts of different things as far as even reducing some of the mowing responsibility that we have in town. I know Sioux Falls has been very successful with planting native grasses and then just mowing out a 20 or 30 strip area adjacent to their bike trail and really reducing mowing. And this project will involve all those types of things, and it will involve multiple agencies. Talked to Roger Foote about it, and he's excited and would definitely be involved. I've talked with Game Fish and Parks. So, first we'll kind of put a plan together, and then we'll kind of put some dollars to it. I think there's going to be some federal grant opportunities, and should be exciting to just see what we can do to improve the river corridor through Watertown.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on to City Park. Probably the only new thing that is in the budget is the chip seal overlay roadway parking lots. Do you want to just touch on that, Jay or Terry?
Yeah, I think that was in the budget previously, but just to redo the parking lots, and we are going to in 2018 be able. We got some money in the budget in 2018 to fill in some road there along the north loop that we have tremendous flooding problems with over there, so we're going to get some work done there. But then just to go through all the roads and get them back up to par, so that our recreational campers can enjoy the park out there.
Does anybody have any questions on any of the other capital items?
Jay, has there been any dollars allocated anywhere for the renovation of that house for some other purpose?
You know, that's where we're at in that 2021 with the $70,000. We put some designs together, but you know, as we look at several of the projects here, I think Terry and I would agree that really would like to discuss that probably at a later time in further detail, because we're looking at adding some campsites, and these are all revenue producers, but we got some designs on how we can convert the residents out there into a lodge. And we got some designs on how we can convert the resident garage out there into 2 camping cabins. Plus, we got individual camping cabins, additional pads. So there's a lot of things, and these are all kind of neat things because they're revenue producers for us. In the state park system, a lodge like the size of the residence house out there would be at about $185 a night right now. And so I think we could do that or greater, and I think we'd get a lot of use out there. And the camping cabins would get tremendous use, and they're in that $30 to $40 range per night.
So that's what that 70 grand is for.
Yes, I think that 70 grand, that would be for the residence remodel as well as the residence garage remodel into 2 cabins.
Okay.
Jay, what's the comfort station?
That would be a replacement project. This is based on estimates of, well, one of the last ones they did in Custer State Park in the state park system. That's what the comfort station cost out there, and this would be to replace the one in the South Loop that dates back. Do you know how old that facility is?
Old.
Probably 70s, and you know, it just would be really nice to have more modern and usable facilities out there.
Is there any more talk about a cleaning station at these different campsites? Fish cleaning?
Fish cleaning, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Dan.
There hasn't been in the last 8 to 9 months. You know, we've talked about different locations and that type of thing for a fish cleaning station too. But you know, and they have improved though so much over the last few years. I was thinking you got to kind of be cognizant of the cleanliness and smell associated with them too. But the new facilities are much better. And really, to be perfectly honest, previous summers I've heard about that, but this summer I had not one comment about a fish cleaning station.
And there's not one on the whole lake, is there?
No. I think probably the closest one would be Webster.
Well, and if I catch fish here, I don't want to drive to Webster. Do you have any idea what that costs? I mean, is it a $50,000 deal? Is it a...
You know, I'd have to look back, but depending on where you have your utility resources, if they're closer, if you have to pipe them in a long ways, they can get pretty expensive. But what were we looking at? That one, I got some information on grinders, and I think they were like $85,000 for the grinders themselves, but then putting the whole utilities. There's a, what is it, a Barracuda or something like that?
Sounds right.
Yeah. I can do some research and let you know.
Lee?
We could just like taser these fish or something. The only other thing I have heard in regards to a comfort station is we don't have a place that I'm aware of in town that people can go and just use the comfort station outside of the park, right? So you'd have to drive in there in order to use that, right?
Right.
Has there ever been a thought?
Are you talking about a dump station? Okay.
Right. I'm assuming that if you redid that, you'd kind of redo the whole thing there, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Has there ever been thought of adding a city dump site anywhere? I think it would get used. I really do.
There used to be one behind Stone Oil, but I don't, our Stone's out by the interstate, but I don't think that one functions anymore.
Well, and we do need one in regards to your comment. Doug taking our manager out there, hears multiple frustrations from paid campers that Sunday they want to leave. They can't get to our dump station because people are coming off North Lake Drive or South Lake Drive, coming from a complete different campground, pulling into our dump station. And not that we have any way to stop them, but Doug does get frustrations from registered campers that they've got to sit number 10 in line to get to our dump station when they see him pull off, South Lake Drive, not even being a registered camper. So there is frustration. So I think a city one would be a huge asset if we could provide.
Maybe at least needs to go into our planning, at least to look at it and say, what would do we have a place for it, and what does something like that cost? And then figure out next year, does it go in here somewhere? Same thing with the fish cleaning station.
I think that's what we're referring to is really master planning out City Park instead of this year putting a camping cabin here, because this year looks good. Next year, let's go across here just to get a comprehensive plan that includes maybe part of the remodel of that residence has a part of a fish cleaning station. Maybe there's a small convenience store versus a lodge. There's so many different aspects we can look at those properties for.
Would you guys ever consider moving the dump station out of the park? Let's say across the road to the east or something like that?
If you had room like that, you could certainly do a much better job, that you could get double-sided and multiple dump stations that campers could just come in and out of there. I was, over the weekend, had a chance to drive through Lake Vermilion Recreation Area, one of the newer state parks, and their dump station, it must be a football field long, and they got 4 sites where people can dump, and people can just get in and out of there really nicely.
And that's the east side of City Park. Through all the years we've thrown so many things out at that property. Just what do you do with it? But once you develop it, and you don't want to get it right. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing with as congested as we are at City Park, it might be difficult to find that location within the park itself. So if we could find something adjacent that would accommodate not only City Park campers, but other campers that are using the highways coming in and out of Watertown.
Do you charge for that service, or could you? Do you want to?
We've talked about charging for non-registered camper. It would be a complete trust system. The metal box that says non-campers X number of dollars. It doesn't pay for us to staff it. It'll cost the city more money than we're going to gain probably. But that's been a discussion point to just say, non-registered campers, it's a $5 dump fee or whatever it may be, but it's going to be a self-serve, put your money in the box, but you may collect 50%. You don't know, but there's a lot of people in this community that camp, and not all at City Park, but it sure seems like we get the bulk of the dump station. So, and we do have, the 6 full service now that all have, we call them dump stations for themselves. So it's not a difficult if once we find the main sewer line, tapping into it isn't difficult. I don't think we're talking a large dollar amount here, whatsoever, if we choose a location close to the city, sanitary sewers. So.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Little chat. It is 9 o'clock. It is. I can feel it. It's 9 o'clock. We still have quite a bit we need to go through. Thoughts? It gets to be a long night. I know that we have at the end we have sewer, solid waste, airport. They are our 3 enterprise funds. I don't know if you guys have a whole lot of questions for them, but basically The airport, their CIP matches what the federal government says is on their 5-year plan. And so there's not a whole lot of wiggle room, and it's really dictated. And this was updated based on that update, and that's why the 2018 changed. And they did make some changes, which I put in there. The sewer and the solid waste, they charge user fees that are supposed to take care of operations and any capital needs. And they have always done that. They're not subsidized by anything other than user fees. Mike does a really good job of keeping these things moving forward. He assesses his needs for his equipment and his capital. We usually will do a 3-year cash flow to make sure. We're probably going to need to do one once this land purchase goes through, just to see if there's any change in that, because that will be some fund balance that will have to be used to do that land purchase not anticipated. But we usually do a 3-year cash flow just to make sure that we don't need to readjust any user fees, we don't need to move any projects around, that there's adequate funds coming in to cover those. So I don't know, just so that if we do move this to another night, which I'm going to recommend, because we haven't even gotten to the Fund 212, and we usually spend a little bit of time on that because that's where our large projects are. But just so they don't have to come back, does anybody have any, burning questions that they want to talk about on the long-term CIP for at least the enterprise funds? They're kind of a little bit different than all of our other funds. Not really dependent on sales tax dollars, and they're really driven by those user fees and by the needs to get those services out. Not EPA standards, but just there's a lot of federal guidelines that they have to go by. So does anybody have any questions for those 3 funds? Okay. If you do, you can sure talk to Mike or Todd directly and ask those questions sometime before this long-term plan is adopted by you guys. So for the rest of it, I don't know how fast you guys, is there anything?
Well,
could we get this?
The watershed project has got to be pretty quick. There's hardly anything in it.
Well, the one big thing you're going to want to talk about is that phosphorus removal facility upgrade. I don't know how much discussion you want to have on that, whether that's something, I know it was in the 19 and 20 budget. It was recommended to be pushed back to 22-23. I think it's something that's always been talked about, but it's never been anything in the long-term budget itself. So now there's a number in there, and there's a year, and so I'm not sure if you want to give that some consideration or discussion, or whether you're not looking like. I know the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, it's basically equipment and technology. I don't think there's much we need to say about that one.
Exactly, and Terry and I can, if anybody has any questions, we're representing
right.
John to the
Yep.
night. So.
Yep, and that's basically what he's always had in his budget is equipment. The building is relatively new yet, so he did not have anything for building wise. 911 is also one that's mostly technology driven, and not much on there. So it really comes down to, do you want to talk about that phosphorus building and then the Fund 212? Those are really the 2 that we have left.
So are you suggesting those are not tonight, though, or?
Well, it all depends on how much time. Do you think it's something that we could take care of within a half hour and be done?
As I've went through this, other than the 2 you mentioned, I'm good with everything else that's in there that I have went through.
Okay. So, I guess it's just time-wise. It's just one of those things where I'm not looking to have another meeting, but I'm not looking to be here till 10:30 either.
Shelley, I don't want to give the 212, I don't want to shortchange that discussion. Do you have any sense, or Mayor, I don't want to spend another night on this either, but we're all tired of long meetings. Do you have any sense of what the agenda because there's no time crunch as far as getting this job done. What I'm suggesting is if we can pare back the agenda for the meeting in 2 weeks or a
18th?
week and a half.
We could, yeah,
and
or the work session. You want to do the work session?
Or that, and cover the 212, and maybe the
and then the
big-
phosphorus.
unless we want to speak to that tonight, but I don't want to shortchange the 212 discussion.
Correct. Yep. And I think some talk needs to happen, and maybe Shane needs to be here because he kind of fashioned this after that pavement management system, and I think maybe he needs to explain to you guys a little bit about how that system is working and how they're coming up with these projects and that plan. And he is not in attendance tonight because I think he's out of town. So I think it'd probably be okay. So if your guys are okay with that, we can sure put that on the work session.
Let's do that, and Roger's here. Let's get the other one done.
Yeah, Roger's been here since
Okay.
5 o'clock, so let's give him a chance yet tonight.
Oh, we fed him, so he ought to be just happy.
I saw him sneaking back for pizza here a little while ago, too.
Lee promised he was going to tase me. Do it again. Do it again.
All right. Well, it might keep you awake. All right. So, do you have any comments, Roger, that you want to make about the phosphorus removal facility upgrade project?
This is the project that we've been talking about for well over a couple of years. I think the last time I was to the council was February, March, I believe, when I brought the proposal from Clear As forward. We've looked at multiple different ways of in-lake treatment to remove the nutrients that are in the lake, or to at least keep ahead of what's coming in. This is the number. I truly believe that this is the best way to handle this situation. The lake quality has gotten better over the last 3 years. Been getting lots of comments on how nice and clear it is. There have been some algae blooms, some weed issues. I do believe I heard Chuck Langer tell someone that they could dump Roundup in the water once on the garden show. I did call and correct him. But I do believe that this is basically a function of the smaller amounts of runoff from the watershed that we've had over the last 3 years. Basically, the drought cycle has slowed down that nutrient input. Now that we've repaired the weir, we're going to get more water into the lake come spring. That's going to bring in more nutrients, and it won't go down nearly as fast as it has in the past. I really, truly believe that we need to do something to stay ahead of this, to remove the nutrients that are in the lake on an ongoing basis, to bring those levels down so that we won't have the major algae blooms in the future that we're kind of stacking up to get as soon as we get a big nitrogen rush from the watershed area.
Roger, how are you going to prove to whoever is sitting behind this desk that this $4 million is going to be worth it? I mean, because we could get one flood and years of work is gone, right? So how are we going to know that this money is going to be worth it?
How can I phrase this? We've been working on this for over 5 years now. We've looked at many, many, many different options on how to deal with this problem. We've had experts from NDSU, from SDSU, the Clear As people themselves. There's literature that we've looked at, scientific studies that we've looked at. Nothing says that it won't work. Even the studies that I've done over the last 3 years at the plant, it functions, it does work. We just need to ramp it up to an industrial scale. I don't know how else I can.
So what does that mean? What does $4 million buy me? We've
That
taken
buys-
out 12 pounds of phosphorus in 3 years, right?
That was at 20 gallons a minute.
Okay, but I mean,
What
that's
we're going to do is 1,000 gallons a minute.
Okay,
We're going to remove
so put it in some relation for me then.
exponentially. 600 pounds of phosphorus removed a year will eliminate the possibility of 600 times. Where's the number here? 600 pounds times 500 is a whole lot of algae that will not grow. We will return a balance back to the lake, a balance of nutrients that the plant life, you'll have less algae, more plants, but in a balance so that you don't have massive growths of one or the other. The clarity, of course, will be there. It'll be less productive in a biological sense, yet the overall health of the water body will improve. As you've heard over the last 3 years, as things have improved, the clarity has improved, how people have been spending more time on the lake, spending more money, spending more time on the lake. Property, I don't know if property values have gone up or not, but I'm sure that it does have some sort of effect on that. How else can I answer that question?
Roger, are there any grants of any kind, or is there anything that can, because it's for water quality, that could help pay for that?
I'm looking at a number of different grants. Right now, the state is pretty limited on what they're willing to grant to. We've been looking at some foundation stuff, some EPA stuff directly, that sort of thing. I don't expect the city to fund 100% of this, but if the city is willing to fund the majority of it, it makes getting grant funding a lot easier if we're not asking the state to foot the whole bill or a different agency to do that.
Rogers, I recall when you gave your work session presentation a number of months ago, you laid out there a couple different sizes, if that's the right terminology, of facilities that could be utilized. Do you know which? Am I right? Am I phrasing my question? Because I thought one was like 3 million, one was like 6 million, as I recall. I mean, is this what the smaller size facility?
No, this is what we were comparing is a $3,500,000 facility is the second of the two scenarios. This will remove, where is it? Basically twice the 1,200 pounds of phosphorus per year versus at $2 million at 600 pounds of phosphorus per year.
So this was the bigger.
This is the bigger system.
Are there some lakes in the area or in the upper Midwest that have that are utilizing these facilities that we can get some handle on what kind of success or results they've seen?
The company that I've been working with, the ClearAz, has facilities set up in a number of different places. Petersburg, Ohio, Millbury, Maine, Missoula, Montana, Spokane, Washington. Their percentage of efficiency are well into the 90s, from 92 to 95% efficiency of water coming in and clearing it out. If you wish, I can bring those people back and they can talk more about their success stories. Just in the last year, I think they've had a couple other systems go online. They're not lake systems per se, paper mills, industrial compounds, that kind of stuff. But it's the same basic system. One thing I would like to note that once we do the capital improvement, the byproduct, the algae that would be created by this system is valuable enough to sell to cover the operating expenses of the facility. So that should take a deep breath there, that we don't have to continually fund operations because it would be self-funding after that point.
Who's looking at buying that, Roger?
There's a number of companies popping up across the country. One of the biggest things is using algae to create water bottles. Take plastic water bottles out of the trash stream. I mean, that's huge. They biodegrade in a few months and they're gone.
Well, just a comment. I mean, we're looking at this as being a 2023. I mean, it's out there a ways. And I know a few weeks ago in our budget hearing, we were talking about, designing an overall comprehensive plan as far as, what the lake needs or what. I mean, this to me is part of that process, is it not? I mean, I'm not saying we're getting the cart before the horse here, but because we are pushing this out a number of years, I'd like to see what that plan would entail and how this might fit into that.
Well, this is definitely a part of that, and one of the main reasons for getting this onto the 22-23 years is to have this conversation. If we want to do this, if we want to improve the lake, this is what it's going to cost. If you don't want to do that, well, then I should spend my time looking at other things.
Roger, this last spring we had an amount of water come into the lake, right? And then the lake went up a foot or whatever it did. Are you able to look at the results of what water came in and what that added in regard to the phosphorus into the lake?
Generally, yes.
So what would you have seen from the runoff this last spring? What did it add to the lake?
The calculations I was basing on assumed that the lake was going to come up 3 feet, although it did not. It only came up 2. The average phosphorus level was 0.7 milligrams per liter coming in. That translates to 1,600 pounds of phosphorus that came in. Oh, yes. No, I'm sorry. That was a nitrogen calculation. We had 40,000 pounds of nitrogen come in, which would, at a 25-to-1 ratio, would utilize 1,600 pounds of phosphorus, times 300 pounds for algae would be 240 tons of algae that was possible this summer, if it came up 3 feet. That didn't happen, although the potential is there for that to happen when the environmental conditions are right. I don't have the exact calculation of the phosphorus in front of me that came in. It's roughly that 600 pounds per year on average. Which is the smaller system that would take care of that.
So that's what you estimate that number to have been coming in?
Over the last 10 years, I have water samples both outside and inside the lake, and that has been the average over that 10-year period. But you take a year like last year, not a lot came in. We would have been way ahead of the game there. And there's other processes in play. The sedimentation, stuff does get locked up in the bottom. If it's there long enough and additional sediment traps it, covers it, then it doesn't get released back into the lake as readily, if at all. So it's more than just what's coming in, it's what's there already and what gets recycled with the different processes. I don't know if that's helping you at all.
Well, it is, and to me, historically this has all been a test, right? So to speak, for the last 3-4 years.
Correct.
And so to take that giant leap of faith from those small numbers to $4 million is a big leap. I mean, it is a big leap. So, I mean, we're going to have to know, not have a fuzzy feeling. We're going to have to know what our outcome's going to be and then put a value on that.
Part of the testing, or the 50,000 that we have slotted for 2022, is a further in-depth engineering study to further justify those numbers. 50,000 is pretty basic for an engineering study. You'll see that same number on multiple different projects. That will definitely tell you whether or not they can make that work or not. And that will tell you whether or not the $4 million is worth the effort to do. They'll take a look at the existing facilities, if they'll work, if they won't work, and the processes that they have in mind. The photobioreactors, will they fit on the facility? Will they not? And will they be as efficient as they claim that they will be?
And will this be in the current facility that's there? Or would there be addition onto that, or how would that work?
That's part of that 50,000 study, is to see if we can get it to fit in there, to utilize the equipment and the tanks that are there, and perhaps putting the photobioreactor on the roof or on the lake side of the property, how all that will fit together.
This might be a minor point, but keeping the theme with, as Shelley mentioned to us, of firm intentions, it almost seems that that study should be a little further ahead than the $4 million, because if we do the study and we're not sure quite what's going to happen, and the next year we got $4 million slated, I just feel maybe we should either move the study in or move the $4 million out, just to keep in line with our thinking of firm intentions. Because if we're waiting on that study, then our intentions aren't very firm, because it very well could show us the opposite. Does that make sense?
Sure. What would you like to do? When would you like us to do that?
I would say 20 or 21 at the latest. But 20 is probably better. I mean, that gives us 2 years to decide if that's going to be the way we're going. If it's $4 million, which is not a drop in the bucket, I mean, it's 2 years to factor that in. And then if they do they have to build a facility if that one doesn't work? Do we have to tear the other one down?
That would be part of the discussion that we would have when that study comes in.
So Roger, what made up this $4 million then? If we don't know if the building would work, what makes up the $4 million then? Is it assuming the building works?
I'm sure I've shared this with you guys in the past, and I can definitely provide copies. It's to prepare the engineering study protocol, samples, design, implement, report on the paramedic engineering study, everything that goes with it. And it goes on to explain what exactly the test protocols, procedures, methods, the whole thing, to see if it will all work within the facility. It does not include demolition of the facility and building a new one if that's necessary.
Okay, so this is, the assumption is that the current facility is going to work.
Or most of it will work. If we don't need to use a portion of it, or a portion is not usable, then they can route things away from that area or use the parts that they can and add on in modules above or below as necessary.
Can they be in multiple areas, or do they all have to be together?
I don't see why they couldn't have receiving tanks below and a photobioreactor above. It's all plumbing.
Okay.
So it really wouldn't entail. It wouldn't really entail any major construction as far as new building.
Correct.
Okay, so it's, the assumption is current building's going to work to some extent, whatever that is.
Correct.
Okay.
Maybe modifications or something.
Is there any appetite to move that 50,000 up? I mean, you're talking about it. Does somebody want to make a motion
Here's what I
to do
think
that?
we should do. I'd like to move that to 2020, and here's why. We've talked about what are we going to do with the lake? What are we going to do with the lake? I think the point made a minute ago about it being part of our grand scheme, I know that kind of is, but our grand scheme isn't quite cooked yet. We need to get that down on paper. But we've talked about doing something with the lake, but we've never really done a thing. Dredging's too expensive, and other solutions just haven't quite seemed to come around. We've invested in this. The concept is proven on a small scale. Is it scalable? We don't know. That's what this study's going to tell us. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
I'm thinking move that into 2020. As I looked at this thing, I tried to think of something else I could draw a parallel to, and the only thing I come up with is with the airport. We've made decisions over the years to invest in that airport, and it never was a guarantee it's going to pay off. Well, it's going to start paying off. It looks like we might actually really get that thing going. That's the parallel I draw with this. I'd like to move that study into 2020.
Is that your motion, Don?
I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
Any further discussion?
I just look at this as, the lakes, we can't replace the lake no matter what. We can't replace the water. We can't do any of that. If we don't take care of it, it's literally going to be a swamp out there. So let's take the plan. Let's go forward. See if it's going to work. If it's going to work, let's put a plan in place.
All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Good
That up.
discussion, Roger. Thank you.
Yep, I'll send them over to you.
Okay, I will turn it back over to the mayor, and we will do the second penny on the 18th work session.
Is there any old business? Any new business? Any liaison member reports? There's no need to go into executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.